Hey everyone, welcome to Echo Wirm Live. This is a bi-weekly live stream that we do pretty much every other Thursday. A few exceptions, including why we've been on a 3-week break, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Today's live stream is an hour earlier than usual. We're going to try this out this week, see if it works for everybody. I know some people across the Atlantic Ocean have been asking for maybe an earlier live stream so they don't have to go to bed halfway through the live stream. And this gives kind of the East Coast American viewers time to get out of school or work or whatever and join us. So if you are here live, welcome. Happy to have you here. If you guys are watching later on, also happy to have you. Thank you guys for being here. If you ever have any questions and you don't make the live stream, feel free to drop them, not in the chat, obviously, because you won't have access anymore, but drop them down in the comments below and we'll talk about them during our next live stream. There's been a lot of change, or at least things going on in my world as well as the world of the channel. We'll talk about those as we go on today, including potentially some changing of the channel itself and just where to find different things. But we'll talk about that. A few people in the chat saying hi. Hi everybody, happy to have you guys here. If you guys are new here and would like to ask questions in the live chat, you're more than welcome to do so as well. Give me one sec here. Sorry. I am going to just have to moderate the chat a little bit here. So Grace, let that be your one warning here. We will not be talking about Trials of Apollo going forward. But Sarah says, I see you have a new podcast. Yes, that is one of the big new things for the channel. We are going to do a bi-weekly podcast as well, where we kind of supplicate our live streams one Thursday, and then we'll do a podcast the following Thursday, where we talk about the stuff that we cover on the channel. I started with the first chapter of Harry Potter, the Boy Who Lived. It won't be chapter by chapter. It'll probably be just kind of core like sections of chapters as we go on. So I think we'll do the next 3. That's kind of the pre-Wizarding World Harry Potter stuff, and then we'll go on through there. That way it's not taking us forever to get through one series, and then I know you guys some people are desperate for me to talk about Percy Jackson too, so we'll get to that eventually as well. But I'd like to start with Harry Potter just because we don't have any of that content actively on the channel. Sarah W says, what are you hoping the episodes to be? I think I just answered that. If you have a different, if your question is different than what I'm interpreting it as, let me know. But I think I just answered that question. Shark N says, Percy Jackson or Harry Potter? Me personally, it's Harry Potter, but that's just because I grew up with Harry Potter. Percy Jackson didn't come out until I was a little older. I didn't quite get into it as much as I did Harry Potter when I was younger. And for me, as someone who is really into the literary analysis that is offered with different literary works, Harry Potter is far more conducive to that than Percy Jackson is. Percy Jackson is more of an adventure story. Eminent Winkley says, hey there, just finished your audiobook readings for the Heroes of Olympus. My favorite of them was Son of Neptune. Glad to know. Sarah W says, I'd also suggest adding the Hunger Games books as well for the new podcast. Yes, we'll get to Hunger Games eventually as well, probably after Percy Jackson. But if you guys are interested in listening to me read the Hunger Games, we are currently through the first 5 chapters over on Patreon. That is for $3 a month. At the very, very minimum, you get everything. $3 a month, patreon.com/EchoWirm. We're through the first 5 chapters, like I said. That's a daily upload like you guys see on the channel. We also do daily uploads over on Patreon, but we're about 3 weeks to a month in advance of what is coming up on the channel. Let's go to some pre-prepared questions. First one comes from Graham. This is about one of the trivia questions I asked on the channel a couple weeks ago, asking, when are the Chudley Cannons mentioned in Harry Potter? So the Chudley Cannons are a professional Quidditch team. I believe there's 13 professional teams in the Quidditch, the England-Ireland Quidditch League, I think is the official title of the league. And I want to say there's 13 teams. The Chudley Cannons are Ron's favorite team. I think they're mentioned for the first time in Chamber of Secrets, but they really talk about it in depth in Goblet of Fire. So if they're not really mentioned as much in Chamber of Secrets than Wait for Goblet of Fire. I know they really mentioned it around the World Cup, but that's Ron's favorite Quidditch team. What's up, Bree says life has been busy. Hope all is well. Life is very busy, but life is very good at the moment. I'm very, very happy. We had a wonderful trip. I'll talk about the trip a little later if you guys are interested in hearing about it. Question from Elfire Jones, who says, how do you get permission to read audiobooks? Do you reach out to the author or the publishing company, or is it just making sure to put the copyright in the description? Yeah, so you can reach out to whoever holds the copyright, essentially. If you're interested in actually making like Audible, professional, like registered audiobooks. What we do on the channel typically falls under what is called fair use copyright. There's a variety of different criteria for channels to use copyrighted content in various capacities. And that is kind of a good thing and a bad thing when it comes to YouTube. If you guys saw my post earlier, you'll know that we are currently sitting on 2 active copyright strikes, which is very, very scary. Because if you get 3, then that's it. Like, the channel is completely terminated. So each copyright strike stays active for 90 days. Our first one expires in 21 days, which is, I think, the 19th or the 18th or 19th of September. So hopefully we can wait that out, and that expires, and then we'll only be sitting on 1. But we just got a second one this morning for the Spiderwick Chronicles. So all of our Spiderwick Chronicles content is now off of the channel, and we are sitting on thin ice with this channel. But all that to say that YouTube, regardless of whether or not what we're doing is not even just legal, but acceptable by copyright standards, YouTube's copyright system favors the holder of the copyright rather than creators. And so if we are to get a copyright strike, it is significantly harder for us to fight against it than it is for the copyright claimant to just claim it. And so, if you get an author, J.K. Rowling is like that. Lionsgate and now Simon Schuster, I guess, are being a little notorious for going after users with copyrighted content. There's not a lot you can do to fight back against it from a YouTube side of things. Even if you were to, get the money together and take them to court, where you could even potentially win on the grounds of fair use, YouTube is going to side with them, and their system is set up to favor them, which is where we kind of come to what is next for the channel. So I talked about the podcast. Where we're sitting right now, and what I've started doing today, is I'm going to kind of offload some of the content, some of the full form content on the channel, over to different areas. And so what I mean by that, when I say full form content, is we're still going to do daily chapter uploads here. We're always going to keep trying to do daily chapter uploads. But when a book is complete, like you see with Percy Jackson, like you see with kind of all of our other, like, once we get done with a chapter compilation and we offload it somewhere else, we'll have another channel, and I'll send you guys in those directions. If you go to the Percy Jackson or the Camp Half-Blood playlist on the channel right now, you will already see me having done some of those things. I think everything from Sea of Monsters down to Last Olympian is currently on a separate channel. So if you guys want to check out those videos on a separate channel and subscribe to that channel, that is where we're going to start offloading all of our primary full form content. And that way we can keep the user base that we have here, keep you guys engaged in the community that we have here, but not be so worried about the copyright issues here. And we're going to be very careful with what we then put on that other channel. So all of our Spiderwick Chronicles content is still available for free over on Patreon, over on our Vimeo sites. So is Harry Potter, so is The Hunger Games. But for copyright purposes, we can't have those on YouTube anymore. So if you guys are looking for those things, that is where you can go. I won't do it blind for you guys. I will always tell you where you guys can go in order to find that. My content's not disappearing. My daily uploads, especially for my patrons, aren't going anywhere. And hopefully this channel stays intact is kind of what I'm trying to say here. So if you guys see changes to the channel where you're like, what happened to the full versions? Why are you just uploading daily chapters? Why are you only doing live streams? That sort of thing. That's why. And I will send you to the correct places. Let's go back to the chat here. Joseph Morrill says, just hopping in to say hi. We'll watch the vid when my phone isn't almost dead. Been loving the content, Echo. Also, reminder to send me that PO. Yes. Did you send me a message about it? I haven't seen it pop up, but I may have skipped over it if you DM'd me about that. But I will get that to you as soon as possible. K-Star says, haven't watched one of these in ages. Good to see you back, K-Star. Sharkin says, would you rather live in Percy Jackson or live in Harry Potter? I'm going to keep answering Harry Potter just because that was my childhood dream growing up. Eminem Weekly says, what do you consider the funniest moment in the Heroes of Olympus? The funniest moment in Heroes of Olympus. I really like the grain fight in Son of Neptune. I wouldn't say that's the funniest, but to me, I enjoyed that a lot. I think the comedic bits between Jason and Percy are pretty good. Man, to be honest with you, I've kind of offloaded Heroes of Olympus out of my brain a little bit just because I had been doing it for so long. And so now that I'm done recording it, I'm kind of out of it, if that makes any sense. And so I'd really have to think about that. Tell me yours and I'll see if that triggers any actual answers for you. Let's go to a question from Grace, who says, would it be fine if I ask, what are your thoughts for season 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians? Like, will it start the same way the books do? I think so. Yeah, I've mentioned this before on live streams. I'm curious to see. I'm cautiously optimistic for season 2. I did enjoy season 1, but there was a lot changed, and I think it messes with the story arcs of a lot of the characters. And I'm curious to see what things will change going forward. So I think things will start in the same place. I think we'll have Tyson at the beginning. I think we'll get the fight with the Lastrygonian giants at the beginning. But beyond that, I really don't know. I've talked about my curiosities with Annabeth's character going forward because her motivations will be significantly different. I've talked about my curiosity about the inclusion of the Confederate ship that they have in the books. I don't think that they will have that in the TV show. But yeah, I'm kind of cautiously optimistic because I didn't like where season 1 ended with the characters going in the directions that they are. Sarah W. says, are the videos you post on Patreon, like the Hunger Games, etc., free to watch? Yes. So right now, Patreon is, for the paying members, is in advance of the channel about 4 weeks to 5 weeks. But everything else is, I think, free. And if it's not free and it's up on the regular channel, ask me and I'll have to flip that over. But like Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is over on Patreon for free. Hunger Games, the first 5 chapters, are currently only available for the $3 a month or above tiers. But starting October 8th, they will be live free for everybody, if that makes any sense. And then all of the full versions will be the same. Klee says, what are your new thoughts about the new character Allison in PJO live action? Honestly, so I haven't been keeping up with the news a ton. If there have been updates about Allison at all, I know they put out a casting call. I know there's massive speculation for who this character is and what she's going to represent. But beyond that, I personally don't know anything. If you guys have heard updates about it, if you guys are unfamiliar, there's a new character in season 2 that they have put out an open casting call for, named Allison. This is not a character that appears in the books, and so fans are very curious who she is and what it's going to mean for the story going forward, because it is obviously a significant change, adding a new character, a new named character, and potentially a large supporting character going forward that is not in the books. Let's go to a question from Grace, who says, do you think they have an actress yet for Talia? I'd be surprised if they didn't. I don't know when they intend to start filming, but at this point in production, I would be surprised if they haven't already cast that character. That is a significant character going forward, not just in this season, but the following season, and then potential future seasons. Atlantis Gaming says, are you going to start Trials of Apollo soon? Yeah, Trials of Apollo is going to start on Patreon in October. We're taking a break from the Greek stuff after Wrath of the Triple Goddess, and we're going to do Kane Chronicles just to knock it out. Kane Chronicles are easy because there's only 3 of them, and the final 2 have very, very few chapters. I think the second book only has 24 chapters, and I want to say the third book has like 27 chapters, so that's less than a month that it'll take to get through both of those books. So, like I said, Trials of Apollo will start middle October over on Patreon, and then probably hit the channel somewhere end of November. So if you guys want that in advance, I'll give you guys an alert, and you guys can find that over on Patreon. Poseidon's Cabin, BFF of Percy, says, on the second channel, just letting you know there's no Book of the Last Olympian. You have every other book in the first series. Yeah, I ran into my daily uploading limit, so that's the only reason why. It's sitting there as a draft, but I can't publish it until tomorrow. I had a busy morning, if if that wasn't obvious. Let's see here. Rebecca Messer says, says, have you done the Harry Potter series? Yes, I have done every single Harry Potter book. If you guys want to find it, they are available for free. Again, Patreon and Vimeo. The links to either of those are down in the comments section below, or the description of this below. Sarah W. says, have you ever read a book or books where you envision a character differently than the author describes them to be? Example, I didn't initially visualize Annabeth as tall and blonde. Good question. In literature, have I ever done that? So the one that comes to mind, and I knew this going into it, but if you guys know Dune, and Dune is the book that is every midnight, if you're Central Time, shows up on the channel. The main love interest in Dune is Chani, or Chani, as they say in the film version. In the film, she's played by Zendaya, but in the books, she is described never in the first book, but in the second book as having very fair skin and red hair. And so you can go the entire first book and a half of Dune not knowing what Chani looks like, because Frank Herbert doesn't give her a description, which then you get kind of an open range of casting. And that's obviously why we got Zendaya, who is not fair-skinned and red-haired. But I would say my biggest one for me, I don't know, because usually I follow what the authors usually give descriptions of characters immediately. But a lot of the time I'll be disappointed by the way they look on screen. The biggest example for me when that is a case is, Percy Jackson, the films, obviously they're way too old. And Alexandra Daddario has dark hair in the first one. But then Hunger Games too. Jennifer Lawrence is very good in the film role, but compared to the book counterpart is a very, very different portrayal of the character than we see in the book. Obviously a lot older, a lot not scrawny and starving to death, if that makes any sense. And they did that consciously. I know that one they did consciously, but it's always interesting there. Same with Josh Hutcherson. I never would have imagined PETA looking like Josh Hutcherson. Grace says, I see the Divergent book in the background. I love those books. Have you read them yet? Yes, I have read I read the series when they came out, or when the films were big, back in 2014 through 2016. I haven't read them since, and I haven't yet finished reading them on the channel. The pile behind me is kind of my get to it when I can pile. And so Divergent should be up on the channel early next year, I think, if we go according to my schedule. But yeah, I have not finished recording them, but I have recorded the first few chapters of Divergent there. And eventually we'll get to it. Let's go to a question from Boss Matthias, who says, are you ever going to make the Silver Chair audiobook? Yes, I have made the Silver Chair audiobook. It is currently only available over on Patreon. So like I said, $3 a month or more if you guys are able. Otherwise, it will be up on the channel. I think we're going to start Silver Chair as soon as Dune is done. I want to give you a date of September 20th that the first chapter will show up. So as soon as Dune is finished on the channel, Silver Chair will start daily chapters as well. But that is currently available in a complete form over on Patreon. James E. Farrell says, will you be doing Harry Potter solely on the live stream? I'm not exactly sure where to approach your question. If you're asking, will I only read Harry Potter on the live stream? I have already read the entire series of Harry Potter, and you can find that for free on Patreon and Vimeo. We can't do it on YouTube. They are very strict about copyright on YouTube for Harry Potter, but you can go over, like I said, for free to Patreon or Vimeo with the links in the description of this video and find all of my recordings over there. in terms of the content of the podcast, we will get through Harry Potter and then move on to something else, if that's what your question is. We will solely be doing Harry Potter on the live stream or on the podcast until we get done with it, and then we'll move on to Percy Jackson. Atlantis Gaming says, I think Percy Jackson, the TV show, could get 5 seasons plus, hopefully spin-off. So season 2, 5 season. Yeah, I agree. I think they'll do the first 5 seasons. If they greenlight it, I think Disney was pretty high on the first season, so we'll see how season 2 goes. I would really like to see them do Heroes of Olympus. Problem with Heroes of Olympus when it comes to TV is you are telling a 5-book story about children that takes place in a single summer. And so in order to have 5 seasons, you are probably looking at about 7 to 9 years of filming, by which time your Percy Jackson actors will already be adults, and by the time you're done will probably be 25 years old, now playing 16-year-olds. So as much as I would love to see Heroes of Olympus on TV, that is a significant problem with a live version, is because the story is so long, the actors would be significantly older than they need to be by the time you get to that. James E. Farrell says, following the copyright strike, I don't know if it's against YouTube's, but maybe you can make alts not to get banned on the main. It's not against to make alternate channels, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, is we'll offload a lot of our content here so that this channel doesn't receive that 3rd copyright strike, and if another strike were to come, it would happen on a separate channel. Let's see here. K-Star says, I think it made sense for someone with tan skin and dark hair such as Zendaya to play Chani or Chani as red-haired. I think it didn't make sense considering how the Fremen as a whole are described in the book. So the interesting thing about the Fremen is they're never really described physically. The Fremen are not an ethno group or an ethnicity group. The Fremen are a social group and religious group. So you could argue that something like the Jewish people are a ethno-religious group. That's not the case with the Fremen. The Fremen are a social group made up of a variety of ethnicities. So it's not like they all look the same, or to an outsider would look the same. They dress the same, they act the same, but their ethnicity is not consistent. And so that's why you could have a black Fremen, you could have an Arab-looking Fremen, Javier Bardem is Spanish, so you have a Spanish-looking Fremen, and then Chani would have fair skin and red hair, that sort of thing. Eminem Weekly says, what do you think of the casting for Baron Harkonnen, Feyd-Rautha, and Beast Raban in the Dune movies? I thought it was perfect, to be honest with you. I thought Stellan Skarsgård was perfectly creepy for what the Baron needs to be. They definitely wrote him less creepy than he is in the books. In the books, he's a very, very, not just scary guy, but very creepy guy. Does some pretty horrendous things. I thought the portrayal of Feyd-Rautha by Austin Butler was probably the most perfect performance in that entire film. He's slightly different from how he's written in the book. He is a lot more vitriolic, animalistic. He's got a little more personality in the book. He's kind of, we see him a lot younger at the start of the book, and so we see kind of the way he progresses into where he finishes at the bottom. And then Beast Raban isn't really a character in the book. I mean, he is, but they cast Dave Bautista, who is a great actor, fantastic physical performer. If you're a wrestling fan, you know who Bautista is. But because they cast him as such a high-profile actor, they gave him more roles than are in the book. And so I was blown away with all 3 performances, but I also think Dune 2 is one of the greatest movies ever created. So I might be biased when it comes to approaching that. Xpogo Sam says, highlights of your trip to Europe. It's a good trip. I don't know if there are any specific highlights. I'll give you guys kind of the brief rundown of what we did. So last week, my wife and I went to Great Britain. I haven't been there in 10 years, and she has never been out of the country. So we flew over to London. We spent 3 days in London. I went to Stamford Bridge, got to see Chelsea play against Manchester City. What else did we do? I walked around a bunch of different football stadiums. We went to Brentford. We went to Kew Gardens. We did all of the basic London stuff, Tower of London, Westminster. We never got up to 20 Fenchurch. That was what we were really trying to get to. But then we drove. I've never driven a right-handed vehicle, so that was really fun. We rented a car, drove over through Wickham. I got to see Adams Park, home of the Wickham Wanderers, which is my favorite non-Premier League English football club. And then we went over to Stratford-upon-Avon, saw the grave of William Shakespeare, which was really cool. We went to Coventry, saw the Coventry Cathedral. If you guys don't know that backstory, that is a beautiful, beautiful and really solemn experience as a tourist. Stayed in Wolverhampton, so I got to see Molineux Stadium. Then we drove up to Derbyshire, through Staffordshire. Both are beautiful, beautiful counties rather. On her birthday, it was my wife's birthday, on the Wednesday that we were there, we got to do afternoon tea at Chatsworth House, which is where they filmed Pride and Prejudice. So she was really happy about that. Stayed in Chesterfield, and then we drove down all the way to the east of England. I made a pit stop over in Ely so that I could do some book research for my book. And then we drove back to London and flew out the next day. So it was a really fun trip. Casey Campbell says, random thought, but do you think you'd read Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children? It is on my list. I don't know exactly when I'll get to it, but it is definitely on my list. I'll probably put it in my active pipeline behind me as soon as I'm done with a series of unfortunate events, just because they're similar in tone, if that makes any sense. I put series of unfortunate events off until after we were done with Spiderwick because of that kind of similar tone. After Spiderwick, then yeah, you guys know what I'm getting at here. Grace says, what are your thoughts on the Harry Potter show coming out sometime soon? Because the movies did so well and we're pretty close to the books, but there's definitely things the show could have that the movies don't. I'm very excited. I've said for years that Harry Potter should be a TV show rather than a film series. I was saying that when I was 11 years old. There's so much that you miss in the films that could be improved. My big worry is because of the way TV shows are. Like, I wish they would have done it 10 years ago. And I get why you wouldn't do it 10 years ago. But 10 years ago, you would have had a more fluid budget to have a 10 to 15 episode season. Right now, 8 is kind of the standard. And what I worry about with that is we see what happened with House of the Dragon Season 2, where the budget for each episode is way too high. The individual episodes are extended, but then you cut you cut the amount of stories that you're able to tell per season. And I think Harry Potter, specifically when you get to something like Order of the Phoenix, you can't tell Order of the Phoenix in an 8-episode series. It just doesn't work from a storytelling perspective. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very cautiously optimistic based on the way that the TV landscape is going. If you guys are unfamiliar with that phrase, the TV landscape, there are some channels that I could direct you to. Friendly Space Ninja talks about it a lot. I'm trying to think of other ones off the top of my head. He would be the one that I would definitely check out. Friendly Space Ninja talks a lot about just like the state of TV. Same with Supercuts Delight is another channel that you guys can check out if you don't know what I'm talking about there. Lost my place here. Atlantis Gaming says, what is your favorite spot from Percy Jackson in real life? Good question. I've been to the Empire State Building. I'm just trying to think of the ones that I've been to. I've been to Fort Sumter in Charleston. I would say Charleston is one of my favorite cities in the United States. That's not Percy Jackson specifically. That's more Mark of Athena, Heroes of Olympus. But in terms of the Camp Half-Blood universe, I would say Charleston, St. Louis, Gateway Arch National Park. Yeah, those would be the ones off the top of my head. I think Kane Chronicles has a lot more fun locations that I've been to in person. Quebec City's really, really beautiful too. M&M Weekly says, are you a fan of Neil Gaiman, the author of American Gods and Sandman and Coraline? Yeah, I'm not like a diehard Neil Gaiman fan. I think there's some stories of his that I enjoy and some that I don't really enjoy. But I'm a Doctor Who fan, and he has written a very good episode of Doctor Who and a very bad episode of Doctor Who that wasn't his fault for being bad. So yes, I'm familiar with Neil Gaiman, and I, for the most part, am a fan of his style of writing. Sarah W. says, also can't wait for some Nancy Drew readings. We might be waiting on those ones, but they are in my list, I do promise. Khalees says, what is Starbucks, what Starbucks drink is in the background called? This is the Strawberry Acai Refresher with lemonade, no berry inclusion. I get it every single week that we do these live streams. I actually get it every single day. But you guys see me drink it on every single live stream. Xpogo Sam says, where is Fablehaven anticipated to be on the calendar? Fablehaven, so if I think of the schedule right now, Patreon right now is on Hunger Games. As soon as we're done with the first Hunger Games, then we will do the final Chronicles of Narnia book, The Last Battle. Then we will go back to Hunger Games and do Catching Fire. As soon as we're done with Catching Fire, then it's Fablehaven. And then after Fablehaven, then we'll do Mockingjay. So 3 books from now after Hunger Games, which I believe on the calendar puts us for patrons, I want to say early November, maybe December, and then on the channel end of December, early January. Let's go to a question from Isaac Imrie, who, along with Nathan, two have very similar questions. So Isaac Imrie says, can you release the books a bit faster, or at least in bigger chunks? And Nathan says, can you please record 3 chapters a day? Physically, I cannot. I can promise you guys 2 chapters a day. And so the reason being, I don't make any money on YouTube. Like I have mentioned that before. This channel doesn't make any money. This channel is not monetized. As much as I'd like it to be, it's very unlikely, given the content that we have here, that we'll ever be able to monetize the channel. I do make a little money on Patreon, but it's not enough to I couldn't live off of the money that I make on Patreon. So I do have a full-time job outside of this. And I have a wife and a son, and I do my best to spend as much time with them as I can outside of what I do for work. Weekly, I am putting in about 25 hours a week on YouTube, and not getting supplemented for that monetarily is fine. Like, I can do that because I enjoy doing this. But I can't justify taking time away from my family to do more than 2 hours of recording a night, if that makes any sense. And so I can't promise you guys more than 2 chapters, because that is what sometimes I'll record multiple chapters a day. I could, if I had a really good day, I could get in the zone and record 6 chapters of various things, but I can't promise that consistently. And so what I can promise you guys consistently is 2 chapters a day. And so that's why we do things the way we do. So if you guys want to help me get to the point where I can record more than that, you're more than welcome to support me over on Patreon. But I will do this for free because I enjoy doing it. But the downside is that the pace isn't probably where you guys need it to be or want it to be. So we do have over 200 hours of content on the channel, so you guys are more than welcome to check out other stuff. VlixM or VlyXM says, what is your favorite book to read? My favorite book currently, and I've been saying this for 6 months, is A Storm of Swords by George R.R. Martin. Grace says, what is your favorite Harry Potter book? What's your favorite Harry Potter movie? My favorite Harry Potter book is The Sixth, and my favorite movie is Chamber of Secrets. My favorite book is just like you. Traditionally, my favorite books are always the second to last one. And I've mentioned that before. It's because of the way that story arcs work. The 6th book in Harry Potter out of 7, or the 4th out of the 5 books in Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus, that's where the story reaches its high point before it starts to fall. And so I almost always will say the penultimate book. So for me, yeah, that's Half-Blood Prince. My favorite movie from a personal perspective is also Half-Blood Prince. I understand that it's not a very good movie from a quality standpoint. And so from an objective standpoint, my favorite movie is Prisoner of Azkaban. I think Prisoner of Azkaban is by far the best made Harry Potter movie. Eminem Weekly says, what in your opinion is the worst book to movie adaptation you've ever seen? Worst for me is Disney's disastrous adaptation of Artemis Fowl. I think Aragon's pretty bad. I don't know. Aragon just doesn't really lend itself to a film. I don't know how to describe it. I didn't enjoy the Aragon adaptation. Trying to think what else. Yeah, there's a lot of really bad film adaptations. I thought, I mean, you could say Fantastic Beasts because it's not adapting the Fantastic Beasts book. Percy Jackson is obviously the go-to. Artemis Fowl is pretty bad. Oh boy. Mockingjay Part 1 is a decent adaptation of the first half of Mockingjay, but that book didn't need to be split in half, and the movie is really, really poor because of it. It suffers a lot pacing-wise. Yeah. In terms of Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire is probably the worst adaptation, but I still enjoy the Goblet of Fire film. Just it's one of the best books, and it's not one of the best films. Atlantis Gaming says, what is your favorite Rick Riordan book? My favorite Rick Riordan book is, from a personal perspective, is still probably Mark of Athena, but from an objective standpoint is probably... Is it House of Hades or is it Battle of the Labyrinth? That's a good question. I'll go with House of Hades, but it might be recency bias. Let's go to a question. Vlixam says, another question. If you could go into a book, which book would it be? If I could go into a book. Good question. I keep using Harry Potter as my answer, and I don't want to use Harry Potter as my answer, even though it might be the honest answer. I really enjoy the world of Spiderwick. Spiderwick's got a unique world because it's... With fantasy, you always kind of focus it on, Europe, right? And so Spiderwick is interesting because it's got this very old atmosphere. It's got this very, archaic... primordial magic feel to it, woodland magic feel to it, but it takes place in the United States, and so you get kind of this weird colonial vibe to it, not like colonialism, but colonial America, like early 17th, 18th century vibes to Spiderwick Chronicles, even though it takes place in kind of the 90s, early 2000s. So I would probably say Spiderwick Chronicles, to be honest with you. Let's go to... Sarah W. says, I know you watched Goosebumps and R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. Which Goosebumps books were your fave, if you read them, and which ones did you like that didn't have an episode? I haven't read that many Goosebumps books. They were kind of before my time. I really didn't get into horror until I was in high school, by which time the Goosebumps books were about 20 years old. And so I really didn't read horror growing up. I watched a lot of horror by the time, like I said, middle school and high school, but I never really read it. So I can't give an honest answer on the Goosebumps books there. K-Star says, have you seen or read The Darkest Minds? If so, thoughts? I have not. I'll check them out. Casey Campbell says, I thought you were going to say Mockingjay was a failure. I don't like the book very much. I love Catching Fire. I think Catching Fire is easily the best book and easily the best movie. I don't love Mockingjay the book, and I really don't love the adaptation, specifically the first half. Grace says the Allegiant movie is a bad adaptation to the book. Yes, you're right. I might break your heart here and say that I didn't actually enjoy the book that much. But when it comes to the film, if your film is so bad... Sorry, my hair is completely messed up and I'm getting distracted. If your movie is so bad that the stars... So let me give you a backstory to this. So there are 3 main Divergent books, right? There's some kind of off-kilter books, but basically Divergent is a trilogy. Like Hunger Games, like Harry Potter, they decided to take the last book and split it in 2. So the first half of Allegiant was made into the Allegiant film, and they were going to make a 4th movie that I want to say it was called Ascendant or something. Allegiant bombed so bad that Shailene Woodley and most of the other main stars of the film did not agree to appear in the 4th film, would not film it, because the studio wanted to make it a made-for-TV movie. They lost so much money on the 3rd Allegiant movie because of how bad of an adaptation it was that they basically said, we're going to release this on TV. And all the stars were like, no way, because we're not going to get our money back. And so, yeah, terrible. Sarah W. says, I still think Rick has a hard time writing likable female characters. Any thoughts? I would disagree with you on that. I think broadly, you might be right. his approach to female characters is to give them attitude to make you emotionally invested. We see this with Sadie. We see this with Annabeth. He has an issue writing Piper. He really does, because he kind of tries to correct that, and he makes Piper the big issue. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't know why I was thinking about it a lot. Probably because I was writing my own book and I was trying to figure out failures of other writers that I don't want to get into. I think one of the biggest issues with both Jason and Piper separately and then together as a couple is both of them have skill sets that we are very privileged and we don't want to be. Woe is us. Does that make any sense? So like Piper is like really, really pretty, and that is stereotypically the thing that all teenage girls want to be, but she doesn't want to be that. She wants to be humble. And Rick is very bad at writing her into that humility. Does that make any sense? Same with Jason. So Jason is like the all-powerful son of the king of the gods, and he doesn't want to be. But he's got all this power, but he doesn't want to be. And so I think Rick is really bad with them at writing that humility into them, if that makes any sense. But yeah, so a lot of his female characters suffer. I will say I think Hazel is a very, very good character. I've never understood why people don't like Hazel. And I want to say that when I first read Son of Neptune, I didn't like Hazel either. But, like, she's not my favorite character to read, but her story is very, very good. Her character is very, very compelling. And I think Rick, if he has, like, a solidly written female character, it's Hazel. And then I think Sadie really gets into her own toward the end of Throne of Fire and then into Serpent's Shadow, excuse me. Casey Campbell says, the ending to Allegiant made me cry. Made a lot of people cry. Vlixem says, the 2010 through 2013 Percy Jackson movies was a kind of bad adaptation to the book. Yes, I mentioned that. Grace says, thoughts on Calypso and Leo being a toxic relationship? Like in the Trials of Apollo, sometimes I feel like it is. I mean, so surface level, no, it's not a toxic relationship. It's the typical, like, girl won't admit she likes a guy, and so she pretends to be mean to him, and he kind of grows attracted to this meanness. It's a very, like, honest relationship. I think where the competition to that comes into play is when people project onto fictional immortal characters this idea of the age of consent, if that makes any sense. So, like, the fact that Leo is a child and he is in love in a mutually emotional relationship with an immortal goddess who is several thousand years old, I don't think you need to look that deep. Like, I think that is not an appropriate interpretation of... I think it's supposed to just be a feel-good relationship. Like, regardless of who Calypso is character-wise, like, Leo is the hero who came and had to leave and wants to come back, if that makes any sense. So, like, I don't think it's bad. I think there's a lot of projection on it. And I have to refresh myself on the relationship in Trials of Apollo to really understand kind of what you're asking about their relationship. Because I do know they come back. I've read Trials of Apollo before, but the intricacies of that are kind of lost on me at the moment. Sarah W. says, oddly enough, I liked the Percy Jackson movies and the first two Divergent movies, but yeah, Allegiant felt so different from the others. I really the first Divergent movie is very, very good. From just a, I don't know if it's a good adaptation, but as a movie itself, it captures all of the, like, it is the quintessential young adult, like, female heroine movie. And it did very, very well at the box office because of that. Insurgent definitely fell short, but Divergent was, like, that's where young adult fiction movie adaptations peaked, was with Divergent, in my opinion. I'm not saying that the movie itself is better than, like, Hunger Games or anything, but, like, the cultural phenomenon that was the YA fiction female protagonist kind of thing, that hit its very peak with Divergent and then kind of fell off afterwards. Let's see here. Eminem Weekly says, I like Hazel in Heroes of Olympus. I like how compelling her character is. She's very strong, fierce, and well-written while still having a heart for Frank, whom she can love as an equal. I completely agree with you. I think Hazel is a fantastic character. K-Star says, I think the first Percy Jackson movie is good as a movie itself, but not as a book adaptation. I can see that. Yeah, I think, like, it's so different from the book, and that's why people were so upset about it, is, like, the plot is completely different. The quest in the film is to get the pearls, and the pearls are not, like, the pearls are gifted to Percy later on. It's not like they were going on the quest for the pearls to save Percy's mother. It's a completely different story. So I can kind of see where you're coming from there. Sarah W. says, I feel like a big reason why Maze Runner and Divergent weren't so successful compared to Hunger Games is because they focused too much on trying to get out of the dystopian society. What do you think? I don't disagree with you. I think one thing about the Hunger Games that is so compelling about the story and so tragic about the story is we are never taken out of the world, and we are never expected to, like, break free from that world, if that makes any sense. There is a problem with the world that they live in, and they want to solve it and make that world better, but they never try to escape it. Like, they never... Katniss doesn't know what America was like before Panem. Snow doesn't know what America was like before Panem. And so they're never trying to get back to that idealized America, whereas, like, with Divergent, the whole point is to escape the system that they've built. Like, the system is unjust. Well, okay, then you're just... The author is blaming herself for creating the world. And you see that with Maze Runner 2, is you have this world that is unjust, and they're trying to get back to the way things were beforehand, if that makes any sense. I completely agree with you on that approach to things. Let's go to a question from Krakir Degain, who says... I don't know if you've heard of the book Unwind, but you should do a reading of it. I'll add it to my list. So that's the one by Neil Shusterman, I believe, who is the author of the Scythe books. Scythe and Toll and Gleanings and whatever else are part of that. I have never read past the first book of that series. It is, I don't know if it's in the pile behind me, but it is on my reading list, and I'm hoping to get to it soon. So I'm aware of Neil Shusterman. I'm not familiar with Unwind, but I will check it out as well. Let's see here. Sarah W. agrees the characters in Maze Runner and Divergent escape their societies too early, and it feels like what happens now. Yeah, I completely agree. So, oddly enough, I have the same feeling that I have with those movies as I have about open world video games. And what I mean by that is, so City of Ember is another series that I've been reading that is very much like that. And so is The Giver. Now, The Giver is a very good story. The Giver is meticulously written. When you get more into when they expand beyond just the first book and you get into the 4-book quadrilogy, then it gets a little more complicated. But what I mean by the feeling that it gives me is there's kind of this, let's go explore the unknown. There's an emptiness to that, because we're never... The wonderful thing about like something like Game of Thrones or even Star Wars is, even with the unknown, we know that there is something out there, and we know certain things that come from out there, if that makes any sense. That's kind of, when you flesh out your outside world, that kind of gives it less of a terrifying unknown feeling, if that makes any sense. Whereas with like open world video games, if I'm sitting on the edge of Los Santos in GTA and I'm looking out over the ocean, I have no idea what's out there. And it kind of gives me this weird, like eerie, like emptiness feeling. Same with Divergent. Same with, like I said, the City of Ember. Same with Maze Runner. There's an emptiness to the world that doesn't give us enough there's something out there to make it feel like a complete world, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense or if I'm just ranting, but if you guys agree or disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments. Vlixm says, have you ever read The Umbrella Academy? If you have, what do you think about the live action series? I've never seen beyond season 1. I do own all of the Umbrella Academy graphic novels. I'm a huge My Chemical Romance fan. I've never said that on camera, and I don't know if that is implied by the fact that I'm a huge 21 Pilots fan, but I love My Chemical Romance. If you guys don't know, the Umbrella Academy is kind of almost like an emo X-Men, for lack of a better term. It's originally a graphic novel series that was written by the lead singer of My Chemical Romance, Gerard Way, and was made into a fairly successful, at least to start, Netflix series, starring a variety of individuals. The obvious one that comes to mind for me is Elliot Page. Yeah, I mean, I thought the first season was very good. I think there's real world complications with the following seasons. How it was filmed, the kind of this. There's a lot of, I shouldn't say controversy, but there's a lot of changing of the source material that needs to happen because of just things that happened in the world for seasons 2 and 3. And I think that affected my, not enjoyment of it, but I really enjoyed the first season because of how close it was to the source material. And I really enjoy the source material. So that's kind of all I'm going to say on that. If I don't want to get into kind of some mucky water there. Let's see here. Grace says, can anyone relate? Before I read the Percy Jackson books, I loved the movies. Now I know the books and hate the movies. I mean, the whole story is different from the book. Like even Rick said, it's bad. Yeah, the most common time you ever see that is with Harry Potter fans. Like they'll get into the series through the movies, and then they'll really, really hate the movies later on because of the books. It's the same way with Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, the first... Oftentimes the first 6 seasons were regarded as very, very good television, and then season 7 was still great, and then season 8 came out, and then people hated season 8. They looked back on season 7, it wasn't great. They looked back on season 6. If you're a huge fan of the books the way I am, you could argue that about halfway through season 4, things start to get a little questionable, and by the time you're about halfway through season 5, things really start to fall off the rails. So yeah, it's a common thing that you see with people getting into books because of their adaptations, and then revisiting the adaptations and seeing the faults with them. Sarah W. says, would you ever read the Inheritance Games series? I have never heard of the Inheritance Games. If you're referring to the Inheritance Cycle, which is the Aragon series, then yes, it's on the pile behind me, but I've never heard of the Inheritance Games. Could you give me an author? Atlantis Gaming says, I hope they redo the Percy Jackson movie in the future. I don't. I would much rather see it on TV. K-Star says, I like how Rick Riordan wrote the Seven to be afraid or to have a disliking to their own abilities, even before they were claimed or even knew they had powers. I agree. I think the approach to some of the characters is very poor in their execution, and I mentioned that with Jason and Piper. But I really like the fact that Leo's tragedy is linked to his mother's demise. I really like that Frank has his own thing that is then tied into Leo. I like that Hazel has her dark backstory, which always linked to their tragedy in Heroes of Olympus is often linked to their powers or their abilities, and I really like that as well. Let's see here. Question from, or comment from M&M Weekly, who says, love Percy and Annabeth's relationship because them being a couple makes them strong. They are strong as individuals, them being a couple strengthens them in a great way. Same for Frank and Hazel. I completely agree. Casey Campbell also mentions the Inheritance Games. I've never heard of them. Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Okay, I'll check them out. Thank you for letting me know. Vlixm says, I forgot to mention, have you ever read the Outsiders book? What do you think of the movie? I thought the movie was a great... I don't know if it's a perfect adaptation, but in terms of what it did with its casting, like if you guys are unfamiliar, The Outsiders was the movie that started the Brat Pack. So Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, Charlie Sheen tangentially, he wasn't in that film. Robert Downey Jr. was in that film, or I can't remember the exact cast of that movie, but that was the big start of what was called the Brat Pack. There's a bunch of major actors who got their start through that film. I enjoyed the film very much. I really liked the book. Let's go to a question from Ash Loves Leo, who says, where's the full version of Blood of Olympus? It's currently not out yet. So how we typically do things on the channel, and how things might change a little bit going forward, but we'll still do daily uploads. But basically, I would like to do a full book, or a full version of all of the chapters of a book, once I get all of the chapters done. But in the case of a lot of books, such as Harry Potter, such as Heroes of Olympus, I can't fit that into a 10-hour video, and so I have to split it in half. So whenever we get to the halfway point in a story, I'll typically take all of those chapters and put them into a compilation version. So I believe the first half of the full version of Blood of Olympus hits the channel either on Sunday this weekend or Monday, and then the full version should hit the channel September 17th, maybe? So you guys should have everything. I want to say September 16th or 17th. The day after, you will get Chalice of the Gods, and then once Wrath of the Triple Goddess comes out, give me about 2 weeks to record it, and then I'll have that out on the channel as well for you. But yeah, basically just follow the daily chapters, and as soon as we get to the halfway point in the book, that's usually when I will give you guys that. Sorry, my nose is really itchy right now. I do apologize. Sarah W. says, I've heard that the Heroes of Olympus series has both Percy and Annabeth focusing too much on their identity of being a girlfriend or a boyfriend in their relationship. Do you think that's true? You could argue that. I don't think it takes away from the story. I think it's justified. Because of the fact that we get the setup to their relationship for 5 straight books. At least 4, if you consider kind of their setup in the first book. That's the entirety of the Percy Jackson series, or the original 5 Percy Jackson books. And then it's stripped away from them for 2 books. And so I think by the time that we're brought back together, it's warranted in Mark of Athena. And I think the way that it's written in House of Hades is also justified, because it adds a strength to their mission to stick together and continue to push forward, not just for their own survival, but for the survival of everything that they've built, not just between themselves, but everything that they've built throughout their world. So I think there's merit to it, but I don't think it's not, I don't think it's unjustified. 9-Year-Old Army also asks, when will Blood of Olympus be on the channel? I want to say the 16th or 17th of September will the both full versions of it be. Hannah says, where can I find the downloadable versions of your audiobooks? Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Let me take a swig of this real quick. So over on Patreon, if you're a paying member, that's $3 a month or more. I have the option for you guys to have downloadable versions of Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. And so if you guys are interested in that, if you are a paying member over on Patreon, just DM me. Just like say, hey, I'm interested in getting the access to the folder. And then I'll probably ask you for a Gmail account or whatever is easiest in email to send to you. And then I'll get you access to those. So that is a kind of a perk for all of my paying members over there, is that you guys have access to a Google Drive where all of my like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson books, you can download them onto your phones. Sarah W. says, are there any books you read where you didn't like the 2 characters getting together as an endgame relationship? I don't like Twilight very much. I don't know. I'm not big into like romance, which is funny because like one of the major elements of my book is it's a romance novel, arguably. But like, I don't like Twilight very much. I would say Kane Chronicles, I'm not huge on the way that I haven't read this in a while, so I'm kind of forgetting how it ends. But I don't love the way that Rick is approaching the relationship between Carter and Zia, and especially not the relationship with Sadie and Walt. But that's kind of a spoiler for you guys who haven't read Kane Chronicles yet. So I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm not huge into romance. The big one that people always talk about is that Katniss made the wrong decision. And I don't really think that's true. I don't know that there was a right decision for Katniss. Let's see here. K-Star says, the original Percy Jackson art is very disturbing, especially Nico. Yeah, if you guys have ever seen the Demigod Files or the Percy Jackson Ultimate Guide, there's commissioned artwork that Rick Riordan did not give like fair approval on. And so this graphic artist made artwork for Percy Jackson, and a lot of the characters are very, very questionably drawn, especially Nico. Not in like an inappropriate way, but like they look like what were they thinking? It's just a look up Nico D'Angelo and look for a very odd, like almost 3D animated picture of him wearing his like big jacket, and then he's got this face, and he's kind of like, that's the best face I can do for that. Eminem Weekly says, what are some of your pet peeves for writing? Some of mine are constantly calling characters by their full names, and when books go longer than they seriously need to, as if bigger books are better. So one thing that I try to do as a writer is I am very, very meticulous about the organic progression of conversation. And I may be guilty of not doing it correctly. Like that's fine. Like I'm open to criticism, and I'm trying to get better at it. That's why I'm so conscious about it. But what I mean by that is when an author starts a conversation between two characters and wants it to get to an end place, but the composition of that conversation is not organic. It's not necessarily how normal people would talk, but when you put two characters or three characters or however many characters in a situation where the conversation, they say words, but those characters that you've built up wouldn't say those things in the order or in the way, or if it doesn't progress the way that is natural to the characters. And kind of the opposite side of that I've learned in writing is my conversations then get obscenely long, or I have to write new scenes, because when I start a conversation expecting it to end here, in order for that to happen, I have to extend the length of that conversation way over here, or maybe something happens during that conversation that shifts the attention of it, and all of a sudden we have no way to get to that, and then I have to create something else, if that makes any sense. So, like, I just finished chapter 13 of The Radiation Effect on my trip, and it should be, it's up on Patreon right now. It should be up on the channel for you guys tomorrow afternoon. But a single chapter took me an hour and 10 minutes to record because of the fact that the conversations and the situations in that chapter are a lot longer than I had anticipated them to be. If that makes any sense. Grace says, what do you think of Harry and Ginny's relationship in the movie? Terrible. I think it's trouble. It's so awkward and doesn't feel sweet and real, the way the books have them. Hopefully the show will fix that. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Bonnie Wright is a bad actress. I want to say that up front. I just don't think she and Daniel Radcliffe had very good romantic chemistry by any means, and I don't think the writing supported Ginny in the way that it needed to. Ginny is a very, very good character in the book, is not very well portrayed. Like I said, not necessarily to the fault of Bonnie Wright, but she's not written to be a very good character in the films. She's kind of a set piece, to be honest with you. But in the books, Ginny is a very, very fun character, and her relationship with Harry is completely justified and natural. Like I just mentioned with conversations, like another thing that bugs me is relationships. If you force relationships that don't feel natural. The first time I read Twilight, I never felt that the relationship between Bella and Edward even starts naturally. It just kind of happens. It just feels awkward. And given what we know about those characters, it doesn't feel organic. Whereas in Harry Potter, we get 6 full books of Harry and his best friend's sister growing up together, having kind of this one-sided romantic chemistry in one book, that disappearing, and then things kind of coming full circle. And it's very rewarding by the time we finally get there. Sarah W. says, I will always be happy that she ended up with PETA. Gale kept getting more and more aggressive. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason why she chose PETA. Atlantis Gaming says, what is your favorite Percy Jackson book cover? My favorite is Son of Neptune. Good question. I really like the artwork of House of Hades. I really like the artwork of Battle of the Labyrinth. So shocker, my 2 favorite books. Yeah, I think the side, like everything, the core of the artwork is great. but then there's so many little details emblematic of what is in that artwork that is fantastic to me. Oliver Finstead says, how was England? England was fantastic. It was a really, really good trip. I am glad to have gone. It was just my wife and I. We left our kid at home, and it was good. It was wonderful to just date my wife for a week without having to necessarily be active parents. And so it was awesome. We spent 3 days in London. I mentioned this earlier. I went into more detail there, but 3 days in London, went over to the West Midlands for a day, up to Derbyshire for a day, and then back down. K-Star says, I'm on chapter 33 of Son of Neptune, and I have to try to finish by 1 a.m. Otherwise, I've lost a bet. It's 10:05 Greenwich Mountain Time. Gonna have to use your audiobooks and put it on 1.5 speed. Well, I already talk really fast, so hopefully it's not too fast for you, but I'm wishing you the best of luck. I do want to give a pause because my last pre-prepared question we talked about Patreon, and I do want to give a shout out to. This isn't updated, so if you are a new national level member in the last week, this is going to be outdated, and I do apologize for that. But, oh, wrong thing. Let's go to this one here. Champion tier, John Buck, Charles Jacobson, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Zhukov Crawford, Joseph Morrill, Sneavatics, Brooke Bursma, Brandon Doty, Hessal Habashi, Rockin' Ryan 99, Victoria Libretto, Juno, Rania, Katie Rose, Bella Joy, M. Alfaro, and Goose are my top tier patrons. I want to give them a massive, massive shout out. I could not do what I do without you guys. I always mention I would do this even if I wasn't making anything from it, but you guys just justify me locking myself in my basement for 2 hours every night a little bit better. And then if I could find it, there it is. I clicked on the wrong one. These are my national level patrons. I also want to give a shout out to these guys as well. So if you see your name on this list, thank you very much for all of your support, just going above and beyond what I ask from you guys. And even if you guys are in that $3 tier where I don't give you guys direct shout outs, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate everything that you do to support me. Let's go to a question from M&M Weekly, who says, what is your favorite Percy Jackson graphic novel adaptation and your favorite Heroes of Olympic graphic novel adaptation? Good question. I don't own any of them, and I've only ever read Lightning Thief, Lost Hero, and Mark of Athena. And for that reason, I'm going to have to say Mark of Athena. Sarah W. says, I liked Battle of the Labyrinth, but I was disappointed that the whole book wasn't mostly set in the labyrinth and that we didn't get an actual riddle from the Sphinx. Yeah, I can see frustrations with that. To me, the most important bits of the book take place in the labyrinth or in and around it. And it's mostly a vessel for like major plot points. But all of the other stuff that happens outside the labyrinth, to me, is still very, very fun. Like, I know they're outside the labyrinth, but I've always seen, like, the Garion's Ranch stuff as taking place kind of in and around the labyrinth, and so I don't necessarily fall under your thought process there, but I can understand where you're coming from. Saber6 says, would you rather be at Camp Half-Blood or Camp Jupiter? I personally would rather be at Camp Half-Blood. I like the freedom aspect rather than the more regimented aspect of Camp Jupiter. Let's go to a question from Leo, who says, did you use AI for the chapter 18 intro? The answer is no. If you guys listen to chapter 18, I think it's a Piper chapter for the Blood of Olympus. That is not AI. First of all, I am not really a person who supports the use of AI in art. I think there's a place for it, but when it comes to like reading audiobooks, and I say that as an audiobook reader, like I would much rather listen to someone actually read an audiobook. I think it takes very little effort to actually plug it through an AI filter. And I'm the same way when it comes to physical artwork. There may be a few exceptions on my channel where AI, like physical visual artwork, appears. The Bible would be the only example. I take all of that from Google. And if it is AI, then I would much rather have that replaced by actual artwork. But then my own book, the placeholder cover that I have for the radiation effect, is AI for the sake of I do want someone to get paid and be commissioned to make an actual cover for that. And so that's the only reason. You will never find AI on the channel. But Patrick Fabian did record that, so I want to give a shout out to Patrick Fabian. If you guys are familiar with Better Call Saul, he plays Howard Hamlin, and I did pay him for it, so it's not like he did it out of the goodness of his heart, but he did go above and beyond what I asked him to. I asked him to give me a little intro for the channel, and he gave me a 5-minute video that really touched me, and he sang me a happy birthday song, and it was fantastic. So no, that is actually Patrick Fabian, and I can prove it with a video if you guys want me to. Let's go to a question from Desiree, who, along with Jess Hutchie, asks very similar questions. Desiree says, can you narrate book 6 as well? Jess Hutchie says, have you done book 6 yet? I can't find it on the main page. So have I done it yet? Yes. It is currently up over on Patreon. If you guys weren't aware, most people are aware, Percy Jackson is now continuing into a second trilogy. So we had the original 5 Percy Jackson books, we got the 5 Heroes of Olympus books, we got the 5 Trials of Apollo books, and now Rick Riordan is coming back around and doing 3 more Percy Jackson books. One of them is already out, the second one is on its way in September, and the third one is expected to come out next September. So yes, I have recorded Chalice of the Gods. It's not on the channel. It'll be up the day after we get done with Blood of Olympus. But if you guys want it in advance and you want access to a downloadable version of it, it is currently available for $3 a month over on Patreon. Let's see here. Sarah W. says, I have yet to read more from the other Percy series. Just wanted to ask, do any of the main characters have a heavy presence in the Magnus Chase series and the Trials of Apollo series? Yes. Without spoiling things, Magnus Chase shares a last name with a fairly significant Percy Jackson character. So if you weren't aware, Magnus Chase and Annabeth Chase are cousins. So Annabeth does appear, not significantly, but appears tangentially and in person in Magnus Chase. Leo appears in Trials of Apollo. Jason and Piper have a pretty significant role in Trials of Apollo. Nico has a pretty significant role in Trials of Apollo. I'm trying to think if anybody else really appears or if they're just mentioned. Yeah, they definitely do appear, so it's not like these are the last we'll see of the characters. We don't really see Frank or Hazel going into the future, which is kind of a bummer because I really enjoy reading for Frank. I've mentioned it before, like Frank's accent is my natural accent, and so I love just turning on my Canadian and getting a go with my Vancouver accent. It's really fun. So let's go to a question from Eminem Weekly, who says, what is your favorite Percy Jackson graphic novel cover art? Ooh, that's a good question. I will precede my answer by saying I don't know the covers very well. I remember really being impressed with the Lightning Thief the first time I saw it, but off the top of my head, I can't visualize them, and so I can't give you an honest answer unless I were to sit down, type them, and look at all of them collectively, which I'm not going to do for the sake of time. But maybe in 2 weeks when we do another live stream, I'll come back with an honest answer. You say my 3 favorites are Titan's Curse, Last Olympian, and the Sea of Monsters. I'll check it out and give you an honest answer next time. Saber6 says, what villain group did you like better, Kronos and the Titans or Gaia and the Giants? I liked the personalities of the Giants, but because of the iconicity, I don't know if that's a word, but the iconicness of the Titans being the first of the Percy Jackson villains, I'm going to have to choose them. Oliver Finstead says, I have a Bible question. Interesting. I sometimes get videos of people reading the Bible and never really understood what the numbers mean. Like say John 10:10. What does the 10:10 stand for? It's a good question because there are a lot of numbers in the Bible. There is a book of the Bible called Numbers. And then sometimes you get books where the number is before the actual book. So for example, in the New Testament, there is a Gospel of John, and then there is a 1, 2, and 3 John. What those numbers mean, if they are before the name, is that these are 3 separate texts that are basically similar or the same. So for example, 1st and 2nd Timothy are 2 separate letters that Paul wrote to Timothy. So 1 Timothy is Paul's first letter that he wrote to his Apprentice Timothy. The second one is his second letter that he wrote to Timothy. In terms of the numbers that come after, each book of the Bible is separated into chapters. Some books only have one chapter. You get some of the minor prophets at the end of the Old Testament, where there's only one chapter, because they're just not very long. But most books of the Bible will have anywhere from like 5 to 20 chapters, and then you get things like Psalm, where there's 150 of them. So that's the first number. After the colon, then it gets split into verses. So verses, the whole point of verses is for you to be able to memorize things easier. So for example, John 3:16 means that in the Gospel of John, in the 3rd chapter, the 16th verse, or the 16th separation of phrases, is "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son," etc., etc. And so the whole point of the verses, the final number, is to make it easier for people to memorize and use Scripture. It's kind of a pneumatic device. And so you split it into chapters just like you would a normal book. It's kind of different themes going forward. Sometimes chapters have several different themes going on. If you're using the Bible app, it usually tells you all of those different things. But then the second number is the verses. So that's usually anywhere from... the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. That's only 2 words. A lot of the time, it'll be anywhere from 1 to 2 sentences. Question from Saber6 says, should we listen/read The Trials of Apollo before Chalice of the Gods? No. I will say this. If you have the opportunity to read books 6, 7, and 8 of Percy Jackson before Trials of Apollo, do it. Obviously, the 8th book isn't going to come out till next year, so you won't, like, nothing will be spoiled, but Chalice of the Gods takes place before Trials of Apollo. And so I would read Chalice of the Gods before Trials of Apollo, because chronologically that's when they take place. Obviously, you don't have the option to read the 8th book now, so if you jumped ahead to Trials of Apollo, it's not going to spoil anything. I would definitely not read The Sun and the Star before Trials of Apollo, because The Sun and the Star takes place afterwards and has significant spoilers in it from Trials of Apollo. Sarah W. says, has Rick said this new Percy series is just a trilogy? As far as I'm aware, that's the plan. I don't know if there's been an official announcement about that, but everything I have been told about it is that there will be 3 books. I don't know if that was the announcement he made. I don't know if he's planning to turn it into a quintilogy like he usually does for the Percy Jackson series. I don't know what the actual word is for 5. I made that word up. I'm sorry. It is called a quadrilogy if there's 4, but I can't remember what the word for 5 is. But as far as I know, there's only going to be 3 of them, or at least those are the ones that have been greenlit. M&M Weekly says, whenever I see Chione in Heroes of Olympus, she seems like the Camp Half-Blood version, or the Camp Half-Blood series version of Princess Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. P.S. We should have seen her get punished. I don't disagree with you. I can definitely see where that's coming from. She is kind of the evil heiress archetype, if that makes any sense. Her father is very, very powerful. She has chosen evil. Whether or not that is conducive to the father's power, but we definitely see that archetype in Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Sarah W. says, what would you say is the reading order for all the Percy Jackson series? Good question. I actually had that question pre-prepared here from, let's see here. Dempsey Squires says, how does this series go? I've done the first 5 Percy Jackson, and then the one with Jason, Piper, and Leo, and then the other one with Percy and Frank. What is the next book? So the easy answer that I'll give you is look at the playlist that is on the channel, the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles playlist. Those are all in order. So if you ignore the side books, because I do have the side books in there as well, 5 Percy Jacksons, 5 Heroes of Olympus, 3 Percy Jacksons, 2 of which aren't out yet, 5 Trials of Apollo, Sun and the Star. So 5, Return to Percy Jackson, and then 5, and then Sun and the Star. There are other ways to read them. You are, like I said, you're welcome to read Trials of Apollo before Chalice of the Gods, but Chalice of the Gods takes place before Trials of Apollo. Rick Riordan is going back in time to write books 6 through 8. Let's see here. K-Star says, what did you think of Coventry and Wolverhampton? I live in the area and would love to hear others' impressions of the place. Okay, so I'm a Chelsea fan, right? And Noni Madueke said something about Wolverhampton. And I'm not going to say he's right, but I will say that of all of our stops, my wife and I didn't enjoy Wolverhampton that much. And granted, we didn't stay there very long. We stayed right across the street from Molyneux, and we drove a little bit around the town as we were on our way out. I loved Coventry. I would move to Coventry if I had the money to do it. Coventry is beautiful. It's very family friendly. The history of Coventry is crazy. As a Christian, like the story of Coventry Cathedral is wonderful, wonderfully tragic. But then the recovery of it then is like, there are very few times where you see physical representations of redemption, and I think the Coventry Cathedral is a beautiful physical representation of that message. It's got the Children's Museum right across the street. We really liked Coventry. Yeah, I really liked the West Midlands. I even like Birmingham. Birmingham's a little busy for my liking. I'm not a city guy. Like, I enjoy going to cities, but I would much rather live in the suburbs and kind of the small town areas. So, like, my favorite part of the entire trip was driving through Staffordshire. I really enjoyed Cheadle. Is a cute little kind of, it's not little, I guess, but this town between Birmingham and Sheffield that we drove through. We went up to Chesterfield. I really like Chesterfield. But the Midlands area itself, like I really, really enjoyed Coventry, and I would move there in a heartbeat. Not that I don't love where I live. If it were possible to spend summers in England and then move back here, that would be the ideal world. But obviously, I don't have the money to do that. Cora XOXO says, when will you do the Magnus Chase series? Magnus Chase is going to be, like Sarah says, Magnus Chase is going to be the last of the Rick Riordan series that we do, order-wise. So we've already done the first 5 Percy Jackson. We've already done you guys are getting the just kind of end bit of Heroes of Olympus. And then we'll do Chalice of the Gods and Wrath of the Triple Goddess. And then we'll do Kane Chronicles. We'll do the 3 Kane Chronicles. Then we'll do Trials of Apollo, Sun and the Star, and then we'll do Magnus Chase. So timeline-wise, that puts us at about next summer. So you're more than welcome to listen to the official audiobook versions, or if there are other free options on YouTube, please check them out, because it will take me take me a while to get there. But yeah, that's kind of the schedule for the Rick Riordan stuff. Eminem Weekly says, one thing I love about the Artemis Fowl book series is that we go to different continents and cities in almost every book. And New York isn't in this series at all. Yeah. Percy, well, okay. I mean, if you're from the United States, it's usually either Los Angeles or New York, right? If you're setting your city, or if you're setting your book in an American city, it is often one of those 2 places. It's the same way with any literature in England. If you're in a city, it's usually London. Even if it's Doctor Who and you film it in Cardiff, it usually takes place in London. But yeah, I do like that. I love adventure stories that move around. My original plan for the Radiation Effect was to do 3 missions per book, and each one take place around the world. Narrative-wise, that's not possible anymore. There will be some books that have multiple missions in them, but for the first book, I had to significantly reduce the number of missions to fit with the themes that I was writing. K-Star agrees with me, Wolverhampton is trash. Okay, yeah. I wasn't going to say that outright. If you're from Wolverhampton, I do apologize. I love Molyneux Stadium. I think it's a beautiful area, and I had a wonderful interaction at a Cafe Nero in Wolverhampton with the barista behind the bar. But I was much more impressed with all of the other suburbs of Birmingham. So, did you get to go to the Birmingham Library? I didn't. No, we were not in Birmingham very, very long. We did go to the Bull Ring. It was packed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. It was packed. But yeah, Coventry was gorgeous. Let's see here. Sarah says, I love, being from New York, I love when books visit places here. Part of why I really like Spiderwick is it takes place in New York, but not in New York City. It takes place in upstate New York. Upstate New York is beautiful. I've driven through the Adirondacks plenty of times. It's one of the most beautiful places in the country. Let's see here. Cora says, I prefer listening to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's go to a question from Shadowpup, who says, does Annabeth even have a belly button? Yes. So the backstory to this question, right, is Annabeth was not born traditionally. As a child of Athena, it is mentioned that... so if you're familiar with the story of Athena and how she was born asexually from Zeus's head. Like, Zeus had a head injury in battle, and Athena was formed from his head in the injury. And so Athena's children then, in the Percy Jackson universe, are born similarly through Athena's head. And so the question most people have, or at least the fans had, and it actually made its way into canon, I think it's mentioned in... it's either Last Olympian or Mark of Athena that it's mentioned. But people always ask Annabeth if she has a belly button. Because obviously if you're not born from the womb, which that is the organ that connects you to your mother, if you don't have that, do you have a belly button? And the answer is yes. Annabeth mentions that, yes, of course she has a belly button. Her mother wouldn't make her without one, that sort of thing. And so, yes, it's a good question, but the answer is yes. Annabeth looks, by all means, like a normal other person. Cora says, if you could be a demigod and you had the choice, who would you choose as your godly parent? Well, if I had the choice, probably Dionysus, just for the vibes. I don't know. If that were a choice. I've always said, personality-wise, I probably fit Hades the best. My favorite of the characters in the series is Nike, but if I had to choose one based on vibes, then it would be Dionysus. Let's go to a question from Nope Not Me, who says, how did you get into audiobooks? Do you do any contracts through Audible or just your own YouTube gig? I only do things through YouTube. I started doing this a couple years ago. Some of you have probably heard this story before, but I got in a fairly serious accident a few years ago while my wife was pregnant with my son. And it got me just kind of hyper-fixated on legacy and, like, if I were to disappear for whatever reason, would my son be able to enjoy time with me the same way that I enjoyed time with my father? And the big thing that I had growing up with my dad is my dad used to read to me all the time. And so I wanted this to always be an option to my son. Even like if I'm still alive and he goes off to college, that he has dad to read to him at night. And so I started this as just kind of a private output. It like one of the benefits of doing this is it allows me to read and have incentive to read. But it's also a legacy project so that my children, regardless of if I'm in their lives or not for tragic or just unfortunate reasons, that they can always have this as an option. And by default, then you guys also have it. Sarah W. says, which faction would you be on Divergent and which district in the Hunger Games? District would probably be either 7 or 10 based on where I live. But for Divergent, that's a good question. Probably erudite. If the whole me being into literary analysis thing wasn't obvious, I'd probably be erudite. Let's see if I agree with this, Grace. Without the short stories, first 4 Percy Jackson books, then the first 2 Kane Chronicle books, then the 5th Percy Jackson books, then the last Kane Chronicle. I would disagree. I don't think you should read the Kane Chronicles in the middle of Percy Jackson. The stories don't mesh. Like, you'll get distracted. I would read Kane Chronicles completely separately. First 4 Percy Jackson books, then the 5th Percy Jackson book, then the Heroes of Olympus series, then Demigods and Magic, then Chalice of the Gods, then Percy Jackson 7. Yeah, and then Trials of Apollo. Eminem Weekly says, what are your ideal casting choices for the Percy Jackson show? Like going forward, like characters we haven't seen already, because I think they did a decent casting job with what they have. Like, I think Walker Scobell is a very, very good Percy Jackson. Going forward, I don't know. And the problem is, I'm at the age now where I don't know young up-and-coming stars very well. Like, if you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I still would have watched enough, like, not children's, but, like, teen television where I could tell you who the stars are and who's going to be good or who I think would be very good in these roles. I don't know that anymore. I don't watch enough material with young up-and-coming stars to know who I could see going forward. One thing I will say, I've mentioned this before, Lance Reddick died. He was the guy who played Zeus in season 1. He died after they filmed his roles. And if they are to recast him by someone who I think could do a very good job picking up where Lance Reddick left off, and someone who physically looks and acts like Lance Reddick, I think the actor's name is Isaiah Washington. He played Chancellor Jaha in The 100, and I think he would be a very, very good replacement if they do want to replace Zeus going forward. Zainab says, can you please do the Trials of Apollo? Yes, I mentioned that we will do Trials of Apollo after the Kane Chronicles. Should be up on Patreon starting in October sometime, and up on the channel probably end of October, early November. Excuse me. Bazinga Man says, what did Reyna do, or what is Reyna's secret? That is a spoiler, and I'm not going to spoil it here because we aren't there yet on the channel. But it is fairly significant, and it is revealed. Sarah W. says, I read the Kane Chronicles series first and loved it, so I'd recommend doing that and then getting into Percy Jackson. I think you can do either. I just wouldn't read them coincidentally. I think you'll get very confused. Not that you aren't smart enough to separate them, but they take place in the same city. So, like, you're having one magic system written by the same guy with similar, like, character archetypes and similar comedic timing, and it takes place in New York, and so does the other one. And it gets a little confusing. So I personally would not read the two interchangeably. I would finish one and then I'd read the other. And then Grace is also throwing Magnus Chase in there. Yeah, you're more than welcome to. I would not read separate series at the same time or interchangeably. I would do all of the Greek stuff, and then all of the Egyptian stuff, and then all of the Norse stuff, or whatever combination you want to do of those. Or even just not even like that. I would do like the first 5 Percy Jackson, as long as you're like doing it in chunks, and then going into the next like part of the series. That I think that is probably the best. Mateo Bartholin says, what happened with copyright? I just found out. Go back. I went into significant detail at the start of this. But basically right now we're considering options for moving our content over to maybe like a separate channel, just so we can kind of wait out the copyright issues that we have right now, so we don't lose this channel. Because we're only sitting on 2, but if we get a third one, then we lose the channel. So Sarah W. says, what kind of propaganda do you hope to see in the new Hunger Games book? Good question. Off the top of my head, I would like to see a way... So we kind of saw this in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But in Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, nobody's watching the Hunger Games. And so the whole point of that year is to get people to watch the Hunger Games. And by the time we get to the Hunger Games, the book... it's a spectacle. Like, it is a huge, huge event. And so what I would like to see personally is propaganda that factionizes the different districts against each other. Like, radicalizes the districts to support their tributes against the other districts. Because I think if you're at the height of the Hunger Games, story-wise, which is kind of when the 50th Hunger Games is going to take place, then we see the capital at the peak of its power and the districts at their lowest point of teamwork or cooperation, for lack of a better term. So I would like to see some kind of radicalization and factionizing of the different districts against each other rather than against the capital. Let's see here. K-Star says, I imagine Zeus in the books in his full giant god form with a massive build and either long white hair or even long locks. Someone mentioned the really bad artwork for the original Percy Jackson series. One that I actually thought was pretty good was Zeus in the either Demigod Files or the Ultimate Guide. The original Zeus artwork, I think, is accurate to how I've always imagined Zeus. So you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree, if you know which one I'm talking about. I have just a few more pre-prepared questions, excuse me. And then we'll keep going in the chat if you guys want to. Blackheart Dove says, should I start listening to the Kane Chronicles? Is it as good as the Percy Jackson series? Like, personally, I don't think it's, I don't know, like, objective quality is an interesting standpoint. I've never enjoyed it as much as the Percy Jackson series, but I think it's good. I think it's, like, on par with, it's not drastically worse, if that makes any sense. It's just different. You might not like the characters as much. You might not like the magic system as much. It's different, but it's still written the same. The humor is the same. The characters are as likable for the most part. So I wouldn't say the quality is drastically different. I enjoy the Kane Chronicles, for lack of a longer question. Longer answer. I don't know why I said question. Pyromaniac says, yes, absolutely. It's literally how I imagine Zeus. Yeah, me too. So that, yeah. Question from Josh, who says, how do you pronounce Gloucestershire? Good question. One interesting thing about England that Americans get confused by is if there is a C before an E and then an S, like an S-T-E-R, usually Americans are tempted to pronounce it. So instead of saying Gloucestershire, people usually say, like, they like lengthen the word and say Gloucestershire. Same with, like, Leicester. You would say, a lot of Americans mispronounce it as, like, Leicester or Leicester. When you see a C and an E before an S, it's all one syllable. So instead of Gloucester, you would say Gloucester, Gloucestershire. Same with, like, people would say Worcestershire or Worcestershire. It's Worcestershire, Worcester. And then, like, you wouldn't say Chestershire, you just say Cheshire, but, you wouldn't say, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, that's where Cheshire comes from, is it's short for Chestershire. But the pronunciation of that word that you spelled out that looks like Gloucestershire is Gloucestershire. The other interesting one is ER is not like it is in America, it's R, A-R. So, like, the county of Berkshire is actually pronounced Berkshire, or the city of Derby and the county of, or the city of Derby and the county of Derbyshire is actually pronounced Derby and Derbyshire. K-Star says, I say Gloucestershire and Worcestershire. Yeah, it's region. If you're closer than I am, but yeah, it varies on your accent. Sarah W says, to answer the question, I loved Kane Chronicles. If you love ancient Egypt, you'll like it. Yeah, I agree. I think that might be part of it. Okay, it's weird because I really enjoy like dynastic history of Egypt, but I don't know that, like, the culture, Egyptology has never been a huge thing for me. So, like, I'm very into, like, the reigns of the pharaohs, but the whole magic and god belief system has never been huge for me. And maybe that's why I dislike it. Or not dislike it, but why I don't like it as much as Percy Jackson. Grace says, what character are you hoping to see in the Harry Potter show that are not in the movies? For me, I hope to see Peeves the Poltergeist. Yeah, Peeves is the obvious one. Let's see, what other major plot lines would I like to see that aren't? I mean, Spew is kind of boring, but it'd be nice to see Spew included in the TV show. The big thing for me, because I'm such a fan of the Half-Blood Prince book, I want to see more of the Voldemort backstory. I want to see the stuff at the Gaunt Shack with Bob Ogden. I want to see not just Dumbledore at the Dumbledore going back to the orphanage and the stuff with Slughorn, but I also want to see like the Hepzibah Smith stuff and the stuff in Albania and stuff like that. So if we could get that, or then like the flashbacks that we see in Deathly Hallows, where we actually get to go back and watch what happens with Harry's parents, I would love to see that. Stinker says, what's your least favorite Greek god? Hera. I think Hera is boring. I know that's maybe a hot take, but I've never been a big fan of Hera. Pyromaniac says, I listened to your audiobooks of the Percy Jackson series and then another person for Trials of Apollo, and I'm so used to your pronunciation of everything that it's painful to listen to the other one. Yeah, I do pronounce things kind of weird. I do say Talia instead of Thalia. That's because I grew up watching the films and the original audiobooks, and that is where that pronunciation comes from. They changed it for the TV show now. They are going with Thalia, but that's why I say Talia. Trying to think of other words that I might pronounce weird. I know originally I said Aegis for the shield. It's pronounced Aegis. That is correct. I did change that. The other one is Cyclopes and Cyclopes. Those can be used interchangeably, but I have switched to saying Cyclopes instead of Cyclopes. But like Demeter, Hephaestus, Dionysus, those are the correct pronunciations, so I don't know if they pronounce those differently. K-Star says, mine was Aphrodite because she was very snaky and devious. I can see that. Sarah W. says, I hate that Zeus keeps getting portrayed as a good guy and Hades as a bad guy in media. Yeah, I can tell you the backstory to why that is. That is a... So, and I say this as a Christian person, that is a Christendom interpretation of a separate mythology system. And when you do that, it not only... So what I mean by that is when Christianity took over as the majority religion in Europe in the Middle Ages, there was a perspective put on all of these older stories and pagan stories that doesn't work. So for example, like Zeus, because he's the king of the gods and the all-powerful god of the sky, like Zeus was then interpreted to be similar to the Christian god, because that is similar to the imagery that we get with the Christian god. And same with Hades, being the symbol of the dead in at least medieval Christian mythology or Christian theology. That is how you would also apply Satan to. And if you're looking at the original Greek myths, the two aren't exchangeable. Like you like Zeus is a corruptible figure. The Christian god is not. Like they are two very, very different characters. And so when you apply the Christian god mythology to Zeus, imagery-wise, and try to make Zeus a good person, then what you're actually doing is you're taking all of the bad things associated with Zeus and projecting them onto the Christian god, which is completely inherently backwards from how the Christian god is supposed to be believed in, and that's not who the Christian god is. Same with Hades and same with Satan. Hades is not necessarily... Satan is literally the embodiment of evil and corruption. So that's kind of the backstory to that. That's why we associate Zeus as a good person and Hades as a bad person. Pyromaniac says, mine is Zeus, mainly because from a Percy Jackson perspective, we don't have many stories of his relationship with the mothers of his children, so it's so hard to sympathize with him. I can see that. We do get a little insight to it with Jason and Talia's mother, but not nearly as much as we do with Hades and his women, for lack of a better term. Stinker agrees with me about Hera. Mirage GSM says, it would honestly never have occurred to me to pronounce Talia with a soft TH sound. Yeah, believe it or not, that is the correct modern Greek way of saying that name, is Thalia. Because the Greeks typically do, like, for example, the town of Thessaloniki, or if you're going off the Bible, Thessalonians, it's a soft TH. Historically, that's not necessarily accurate. You'd probably pronounce it in ancient Greek as Thessalonians. And so it gets a little muddy. If you're using ancient Greek, then it probably should be Talia or Talia. But if you're going by modern Greek pronunciation, which has been, you say modern Greek, but that's the way it's been for like 2,000 years, then you would go with the soft th. And so that's when it gets a little confusing. Let's see here. Sarah says, we will always love I Ate the Kitchen Table. Pyromaniac says, OMG, I Ate the Kitchen Table. Had me cackling when I heard it. I'm glad you guys brought that up because it gives me a chance to plug this. If you guys want to support me monetarily, if you don't want to do Patreon, or if, you've already done Patreon, head on over to the bonfire link down below. I do have a shirt for sale. You can get it in a t-shirt, a long sleeve, pullover hoodie, or a crewneck sweatshirt. It just says, I Ate the Kitchen Table in the original Percy Jackson font with a little trident underneath. You guys can get that for as low as $19.99 American. I don't know what that translates to. It's probably something like $17 or 17 pounds, maybe 16.50 euros. But if you guys want to support me, you are more than welcome to do so with the link below. Oliver Finstad says, maybe my fault for not paying attention, but why did Voldemort go after Harry's parents? And Stinker says, guys, my favorite Heroes of Olympus character is obviously Buford, the three-legged table. I'll come back to Oliver real quick. Let me touch on Stinker. I agree with Buford. Yeah. So this is going to be a spoiler for those of you that have not read Harry Potter. And my kind of rule on spoilers is if it's out on the main channel, then it's fine, right? Like if everyone has access to what we're talking about, then it's fine. So for example, if we were talking spoilers for Blood of Olympus, we could go through whatever chapter came out this morning. Harry Potter has been available to you guys for free for a very, very long time. Obviously not on the channel, but I am comfortable answering this as a spoiler. So if you guys don't want to listen to this, maybe click out and fast forward by a minute or so. But the reason that Voldemort went after Harry's parents, and the short answer is he didn't. He went after Harry. Harry's parents got in the way. The reason was there was a prophecy given which basically said that the Dark Lord, Voldemort, would mark a child who was born at the end of July in the year 1980 as his equal, and he would basically intertwine their fates. The full prophecy, I used to be able to recite it, but the prophecy says that the Dark Lord is going to pick a child, and that child is going to have power over Voldemort. The interesting thing about the prophecy is Voldemort didn't hear the whole thing. And so the whole point of the prophecy, or at least like in its entirety, Voldemort would know that if he went after Harry and marked him as his equal, then that would destine Harry to destroy him. And so it would have been better for Voldemort not to even go after Harry, to not even engage with the prophecy. And so in actually going after Harry, because he only heard half of the prophecy and believed that he had to fulfill the prophecy, to stop it from happening, then he went and actually marked Harry as his equal. And so that's why he went after Harry. Harry's parents got in the way. They were killed. That's the tragedy of Harry Potter. Okay. K-Star says 1999 in Great Britain pounds is 1518. Interesting. It probably doesn't translate like that over on... Or maybe it does. Maybe you're saying it directly, but I feel like it was a lot closer when I was over in Britain. Pyromaniac says, I need more Percy Jackson themed shirts. I'm already looking forward to getting a Hotel Valhalla shirt, Camp Jupiter shirt, Camp Half-Blood shirt, and something about the Hunters of Artemis. Yeah, this is, I mean, the only thing that crosses over is the a very generic trident and the font. So this allows me to make money on Percy Jackson content without crossing any illegal copyright boundaries. So Pyromaniac says, so Valdi basically broke the #1 rule about prophecies. Don't try to change them or they will backfire horribly. Yes. And the whole reason that that happened is because he misheard the prophecy. Or I won't spoil who listened to it. I mean, I could. But someone overheard the prophecy and relayed it to Voldemort, but they didn't hear it in its entirety. And so that's why. I have one more pre-prepared question, and then if you guys want to keep asking questions, I can probably go for another half hour if you guys are interested. So feel free to keep asking stuff in the chat if that's the case for you. But let's go to a question from Ultimate Underdog, who says, I saw you explaining the geography of England on one of the trivia posts and got confused. Isn't the west of England just the western part of the country? And the answer is yes and no. I know there are people in the chat who are actually from England who could correct me on this, but my understanding of the directions of England, right? So oftentimes when you think of England, you split it into three parts. You split it into the north, the Midlands, and the south. So the north is basically everything Yorkshire and above. The Midlands is pretty much everything between Yorkshire and London, roughly. And then London and below is the south of England. When you split it into the four cardinal directions, it gets a little more confusing. The north of England still remains practically the same, everything Yorkshire above. That includes like Manchester, Newcastle, Liverpool, that sort of thing. But then the Midlands are kind of split. And where you decide to split it isn't always consistent. I've always been told that the Isle of Wight, which is the big like diamond-shaped island at the bottom of England, is kind of the midway point. And so everything west of that is considered Western England, and everything to the east of that is considered Eastern England. But when you add the term south of England, and when you're talking about the four separate directions, then you're almost always referring to the southeast. So that is everything east of the Isle of Wight, everything from London south. And so the north stays the same. The west includes the West Midlands and the southwest of England. And then the east is the East Midlands and East Anglia. And then the south of England is London and southeastern England. If you guys don't think that's accurate, feel free to correct me. But when people refer to the west country of England, that is always typically the southwest. So the very, like you can think, if you think of England as like a foot, it's the part that juts out over into Cornwall. So this came on a trivia question that I asked the other day, where it was like, what part of England are the majority of the characters from? And the correct answer that I put is the west, because so Godric's Hollow is never given a county, but it's always said to be in the west country, or in the west of England. Dumbledore and Harry are both from Godric's Hollow. Hagrid is from Gloucestershire, which is the west. And then Ron is from Devon, which is in that southwestern foot. And then also Malfoy is from Wiltshire, which is kind of that Midlands area moving into the west country there. So I gave the correct answer as the west. Other people were arguing that the south is the correct answer. I think it depends where you split that. It's not always a north, west, east, or south issue. England's an interesting country, but I love it dearly. I really do love England. Grace says, who would win in a fight, Percy or Harry? I think Percy, because in House of Hades, he was hurting someone through their inside because of his water ability. Yeah, I think it's not even, like, Harry is not a powerful wizard. Like, Harry Potter is not the most powerful wizard who's ever lived. Harry Potter is a victim of circumstance. And even with the magic system we have, like, I think Percy Jackson would beat Dumbledore in a fight, because the magic system is just so much more powerful. Magic in Harry Potter is a traditional fantasy skill-based magic system, whereas Percy Jackson is a mythology deified magic system, if that makes any sense. So because you have the power of the gods, it's significantly stronger than something like anything that you would see in traditional fantasy. The only exception being maybe Lord of the Rings, because Gandalf is quite literally an angel. Pyromaniac says, if you could choose a camp to go to... I did answer this earlier, I'll answer it again. Would you choose Camp Half-Blood or Camp Jupiter? I would choose Camp Half-Blood. Stinker says, I'm about to finish The Blood of Olympus. What book shall I get next? I'm thinking of starting Harry Potter. Yeah, start Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter is a good next step. Pyromaniac says, if you could choose any mythical creature from Greek mythology, monster or otherwise, without getting hurt, who would you want to meet? Garion. That's your deep cut Echo Worm lore for the day. I really love Garion. I have no idea why. Let's go to a question from... Our Pyromaniac says, Percy would beat Harry both magically and physically. Percy is essentially a warrior. Yeah, I agree. Grace says, I'm so sorry, my allergies are just killing me right now. Grace says, which weapon/item of choice would you have based on a character's? Like, I would want Annabeth's invisibility cap. I think the invisibility cap would be probably the one I'd go to as well. Yeah, I like, of all the skills, magic-wise, I think invisibility is one of the stronger ones. If I had something... Well, the shoes from Lightning Thief would give me the ability to fly. I think flight is another really cool ability. So between those two, I would say those would be the ones that I go with. Sarah W., I have answered that a few times. I'll answer it one more time, and then if anyone else asks it, I won't answer it again. I'm sorry. Harry Potter or Percy Jackson? Me, personally, I prefer Harry Potter. Mirage says, also Ares, now that I think about it. Yeah. It's the answer to the fight question. Percy Jackson would absolutely win. Pyromaniac asks, is Garion the three-chested guy? Yes. The one from Battle of the Labyrinth. For whatever reason, I love Garion and constantly talk about him on the channel, it seems. K-Star says, from what I know, around Sheffield and above would be considered north rather than York because Manchester and Liverpool wouldn't be considered the Midlands at all. Yeah. When I say Yorkshire, I mean like Yorkshire, like even the South Riding of Yorkshire. So, yeah, basically Manchester and Liverpool and above is the north. And then everything between that and London, roughly, is the Midlands. So, like, I'm trying to think of my geography. Like Shropshire, Cheshire, West Midlands, Rutland, Derbyshire, Staffordshire. Yeah, not going to go into it, but yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of. Pyromaniac says, go big. Helm of Darkness is where it's at. Hiding in the shadows and teleportation. Yeah, I forgot about the Helm of Darkness. Helm of Darkness would be really cool too. It's maybe I'm mistaking it with Nico's power, but for some reason I was thinking the Helm of Darkness requires you to use a lot of power, but maybe I'm, like I said, maybe I'm confusing Kane Chronicles, and that's why you shouldn't read Kane Chronicles coincidentally. Elias Quigg says, you said you prefer Harry Potter to Percy Jackson. Do you mean as an individual character or in terms of the book series as a whole? Book series. Yeah. Character-wise, I do prefer Percy. That is... You could argue in both directions for the character side of things, but when it comes to books as a whole, like I am someone who prefers books that lend themselves to literary analysis, and also for a nostalgic reason, like I grew up with Harry Potter. I didn't grow up with Percy Jackson. I got into Percy Jackson when I was a little older. And so for like personal reasons and for the literary reasons, I prefer Harry Potter as a series to Percy Jackson or to Rick Riordan's writings. Sarah W. says, what did you think about Selena being the traitor at the end of the last Olympian book? I thought, so the traitor reveal is really cool. The traitor setup isn't great, but it's justified by its reveal, if that makes any sense. Like, they didn't really set it up strongly. There weren't a lot of hints. I mean, they didn't really signpost it at all, which is nice, but there weren't a ton of, like, they didn't lead us into false trails necessarily the way I would have liked to with another story. There wasn't a lot of red herring stuff going on there. But her sacrifice is fantastic. It's one of the best character moments in the entire series, in my opinion. Grace says, Perkabeth or Phrasal? I know it's probably obvious, but Phrasal is close. Yeah, I do love Phrasal, but I have to go with the OG. I mean, I always say it, like, the wonderful thing about Percy and Annabeth's relationship is we've had it longer than anything. Like, that has been a canonical relationship or a prospective relationship since 2005. I was 6 when that book came out. If you go by the original canon of Annabeth and Percy being born in 1993, then that means that both of them are now 31 years old. Fun to think about. Elias Quigg says, in the world of magical items, I would personally take Leo's tool belt. That's he has a lot of really good ones. But for my personal taste, I love flight and I love invisibility. So Sarah W says, for me, it's Per Rachel. You should read Last Olympian again. And maybe I should read Last Olympian again. But I thought Last Olympian made it very, very clear that Rachel's feelings for Percy weren't as romantic as she thought they were. But maybe I'm misreading that. Cora says, I have to go to sleep. It's 11 o'clock in Ireland. Yeah, that's why we moved this live stream up earlier. And I actually thought that this was beneficial. So I think going forward, we'll probably do every other Thursday at 4 Eastern rather than 5 Eastern, because this did seem to go very well. I don't think I've had this many on and off views after 2 hours before. So that's a good thing. Thank you guys for being a part of this. Pyromaniac says, yes, Leo's tool belt. Literally my dream item is someone who carries too much stuff with me. Yeah, Leo's tool belt is pretty cool. So, as we kind of wrap this up, I do want to touch one more time on the copyright thing. Like I said, we're sitting on 2 out of 3 strikes. So what I'm going to try to do is load a lot of that content onto another channel, so we don't get that 3rd strike in the next 3 weeks, which is when our first one expires. So this channel, going forward, so you guys aren't thrown off and aren't confused by where to find stuff, this channel going forward will probably consist only of daily chapters, right? So we'll still do the daily uploads of, right now it's Blood of Olympus, and then it's also coinciding with Dune. Once we get the full versions of those, then we're going to offload them elsewhere to another channel that you can find by searching just for Echo Wirm. Same spelling, same everything, just without the audiobooks. You guys can find that now. Go subscribe if you want to. Or the easiest way to find it is to go check in the Camp Half-Blood playlist. That's on this channel. I have videos there that are on that other channel. So all of the full form videos, if they disappear, that's where they are. And then we'll keep doing our weekly lives or bi-weekly live streams, our bi-weekly podcasts here, daily releases. But I just want to make sure that you guys aren't confused by what's going on, or if something disappears that you don't know where to find it. It's still going to be located in the folders, but it's going to be tied to a different channel, if that makes any sense. So find that, go subscribe, stay tuned. I'll give you guys updates if something happens. If something were to happen where we lose access to this channel, they give us a 7-day grace period. It's happened before for me. I'm familiar with the process. If we were to get that 3rd strike, I would make a post about it, let you guys know where to go. But if for whatever reason something happens where they take the channel away from us immediately, go over to patreon.com/echoworm, and I will make free you will have access for free no matter what. But it'll tell you about updates. So you shouldn't have to pay anything to see that. Just patreon.com/echoworm. I'll let you guys know there. Same with Discord. There's a link to the Discord server down in the description of this live stream. I'll let you guys know what's going on, where things are going to go if that does become the case. So there's a lot of options, a lot of different places that you could find our content. The goal is always to keep an active presence on YouTube. If that were to be the case, then there are some options there. But just so you guys aren't confused, that's what's happening going forward. Going back through here. Sarah W says, did you already say what your favorite Greek myth is? My favorite Greek myth. That's a good question. Jason and the Argonauts. I don't know if that's true. That's just the one that I thought of off the top of my head. I really like the Odyssey, like as a whole. It's very long. It's very hard to read. But it's very good and very rewarding if you understand the mythology about it. Stinker says, what's your least favorite thing about each of the 7 of the prophecy? Good question. Very in-depth question. I would say Jason and Piper are very similar, answer-wise. I mentioned it earlier. I think they are written as replacement, specifically Jason is written as a replacement character for another character and isn't justified in his motivations the way that Percy would be, because he's not as fleshed out as he needs to be. I think both he and Piper suffer from a misplaced humility, if that makes any sense. I think they pretend that they're more humble than they actually are, and it's not written very well. I think my least favorite thing about Leo is his victim complex. I think my least favorite thing about Frank is his insecurity, which is justified by the end of the story, but I think it makes his chapters seem a little whiny. With Hazel, my least favorite thing about Hazel is her... It's not necessarily that noticeable, but now that I've reread it and was like actively looking for it, when she's like, this story doesn't take place over a long period of time. Time still like goes forward, but Hazel is very like prim, proper, and prude in Son of Neptune. And that kind of disappears by the end of the series. And I don't think that it was ever like justified why it disappeared. And so I think Hazel kind of has a like a not good girl gone bad aspect, but like her personality wise, when it comes to like her feelings toward PDA or her feelings toward like outfits, like disappears. And I think that bums me out. I think we miss some of that. Percy, I don't know that I have anything I don't really like about Percy. Annabeth can also be a little bratty, maybe a little whiny. And we'll say for Percy always wins. Let's say that. Mirage says, strikes for what, if I may ask? Our first one, which expires in 21 days, was for Hunger Games. We offloaded those off the channel already, and then today we got a new one for Spiderwick Chronicles. Let's see here. Grace says, who's your favorite character of the 7 besides the obvious Percy and Annabeth? Mine is Frank. Mine is Leo, personally, but my favorite character to read for is Frank because of the accent. Mirage GSM says, isn't that the old channel? It is, kind of. The name is the same. But yeah, it's a different channel. That old one is not there. But Hallow says, thanks for the update. Hope the channel stays up. Me too. So hopefully this saves our options and also keeps the community alive, because that was the biggest bummer the first time we lost the channel, is we went from 24,000 people with like 100 people watching these live streams to nothing. And I don't want that to happen again. K-Star says, I'm going to have to sign up for Patreon again because I'd love to listen to the downloaded version of House of Hades in school. You're more than welcome to. If you miss me mentioning that is an option for my paying members. I have a Google Drive full of downloadable versions of all of the audiobooks. Or at least the full versions of Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. Pyromaniac says, I'm 100% joining the Patreon once I have the money. Yeah, if you guys can't afford it, please don't feel like you're missing anything. It's just, we're about a month in advance of the channel. So everything that's there will be available to you for free. And if not on the channel, then over on Vimeo and Patreon for free, and I will let you guys know about that. Pyromaniac says, have you seen the musical being written about the Odyssey? It's amazing. I have not. Elias Quigg says, I had to read both the Iliad and the Odyssey for my Greek lit class last year, and I agree. Both are kind of slogs to get through, but the stories as a whole are incredible and very influential. Yeah, I've never vibed with the Iliad as much, just because I'm much... It's weird. Like I mentioned the fact that I like Harry Potter more than Percy Jackson because Harry Potter is like a hero's journey, and not a hero's journey. I don't know how to describe it. It's more conducive to literary analysis, which the Iliad is as well. And Percy Jackson is a lot more like the Odyssey, where it's an adventure story. But I don't know why I've never vibed with the Iliad the way I do the Odyssey. Zinker says, you're so underrated. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Pyromaniac says, I love your little throw-ins of subscribe to Echo Wirm audiobooks during the readings. The way you slip them in is chef's kiss. Well, thank you very much. I do it just kind of on the spot as I'm reading, so I try not to stutter over myself while I do it. I appreciate you guys enjoying them. I do that so people don't steal my content, by the way. If you're ever curious why I do that, it's because I have often had people re-upload my content on their own channels and actually somehow get monetized for it. And like, that would be cool if I was also monetized, but I'm not. And I don't think it's fair for people to make money on stuff that I've put a lot of work into. So yeah, that's why. Pyromaniac says they've also given me several jump scares, but that's forgivable since I just laugh after. Yeah, I know which ones you're talking about. I was proud of those ones too. Grace says, which Percy Jackson side character is your favorite? Garion. It's always Garion. Elias Quigg says, you mentioned your least favorite parts of each of the 7. What are your favorite parts of each character? Percy is his attitude. I love Percy's attitude. Annabeth. What is my favorite thing about Annabeth? Her confidence, probably. Like, she just will not lose. So I said that for Percy. Like, Percy doesn't lose. Annabeth's thing is she won't lose because she tells herself she won't. Like, she always has to find a way to succeed. And I wish I had that. I wish I had the drive that she has. Frank is how caring he is. Leo is how funny he is. Hazel's probably her compassion. Piper, I've mentioned, I don't really like Piper very much, but I will say my favorite thing about Jason and Piper. Jason's a good leader. And Piper, I promise I'm not doing this to be I promise there is something about Piper, but for the life of me, I can't think of it at the moment. My favorite thing about Piper, I really, really enjoy Piper in The Lost Hero. I think she loses a lot of her nuance going forward. I think she's very one note going forward. My favorite thing about her in The Lost Hero is her drive to preserve her family, if that makes any sense. Stinker says, what's your favorite and least favorite Harry Potter? Me personally, my favorite is Half-Blood Prince. My least favorite is Chamber of Secrets. Vlixum says, what do you think about the live-action Percy Jackson series? I did mention that earlier in the live stream. If you want to go back and listen, I kind of gave my big thoughts about my thoughts on Season 1 and going into Season 2. Pyromaniac agrees Annabeth refuses to lose, and I absolutely love that. K-Star says, sometimes when Octavian speaks, I put the book down and pause the audiobook because he's very annoying. Yes. The first time I read Blood of Olympus, Octavian drove me crazy too. So hopefully my voice made him as annoying as he was to read, like, visually. Because, yeah, he's an obnoxious character. A better version of the Octavian archetype is Desjardins from Kane Chronicles. The annoying character who is just unjustified in his, or is justified in his reasonings of being wrong, and is annoying about it. If you want a better version of Octavian, go read Kane Chronicles. Elias Quigg says, Jason and Piper both are fairly bland, but all in all, the whole point of their characters is they break the mold. With Piper being a daughter of Aphrodite and Jason not wanting to stay with Rome. Yeah, I mentioned earlier my thoughts on kind of that aspect of things. I think their humility is not written very well, if that makes any sense. Their desire to not be the privileged people that they are is not written in a very sympathetic way, in my opinion. Pyromaniac says, I absolutely love Leo, his sense of humor and his attitude. I literally see myself in him so much. #1 Leo defender. I'll fight you on that title. I really, really enjoy Leo. Sarah W. says, what I hate about reading Annabeth is how no one holds her accountable for her actions. Attitude and behavior, bigotry towards Tyson, Rachel, Percy, etc. Yeah, I can see that. And I know a lot of people don't like Annabeth because of her attitude. I've always been biased toward Annabeth because, like, physically, like, she is, like, the... People always say, like, you have a type. Like, Annabeth is my type. And so everything she's always done for me... Because I read this when I was a lovesick 11-year-old, right? Everything Annabeth has always done is perfect for me. Obviously, now that I am 25 years old and reading these as an adult, yeah, she has a lot of... She makes a lot of questionable decisions, and you're right. especially when it comes to her control of what happens at Camp Half-Blood is very interesting. She has been there a long time, but she's still 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. And it's interesting that she kind of runs amok with doing whatever she wants to do, and nobody ever holds her accountable for it. I think she's justified in her approaches to things. I don't think that her villainization of Tyson is unjustified. Her backstory gives credence to why she believes that. But you're right. Other people don't treat it as negatively as they need to. And I get why that might be annoying. Pyromaniac says we can be co-captains of Leo Defenders. I like that idea. Grace says, if you were a godly demigod, who'd you want as a godly parent? Someone asked that earlier, and I don't know if I gave a decent answer. They said, if I had the option to choose, who would you choose? If I had to choose, I would choose Dionysus because of the vibes. But like personality-wise, or when you take like the personality test, whatever, online that tells you who your godly parent is, mine has always been Hades. Stinker says Leo's chapters are always funny. He always lightens the mood. Yeah, I agree with you. Pyromaniac says the love for Annabeth is so real. Elias Quigg says agreed about Annabeth, and yes, her behavior can be unacceptable, but it's very much so built up through the 20 odd years of books thus far, and it makes sense for her character. Yeah, I agree. Every decision she makes is justified, but I understand the confusion or the bothersomeness of her. Just like literally nobody holds her accountable, and you're right about that. Pyromaniac says, you honestly give me Hermes vibes. I can see that. I think like physically I look very similar to this description of the Stoll twins. A lot of people say I look like Jason too. I'm not big enough to be Jason. Jason's a little more, not like Frank size, but like Jason's a little more muscular than I am. I'm pretty scrawny. Sarah W. says, thank you so much. I don't think I've ever heard Annabeth even say the words, I'm sorry. You're probably right. However, I could justify why she doesn't apologize. Because if you know her backstory, like she wasn't parented in a way that warranted that. Like her parenting situation sucked. Like her father didn't ask for her. Her father never gave her the love that she needed. Annabeth is kind of a tragedy of passive parenting, all in all. Like all of the other characters that you think of, right? Like Percy's mom loves him. Frank's mom loved him. Leo's mom loved him. Jason's mom was a psychopath, so ignore Jason. Piper's dad loved her. Annabeth's dad comes into his own, but especially what we know about early on, especially when he was coming out of college, he was very young when she was born and got into a relationship where her stepmother didn't treat her as one of her own children, or at least from Annabeth's perspective, didn't treat her as one of her own children. And so Annabeth, of all of the characters in the Seven, is kind of the only character where she doesn't have... So Jason's the other example, but Jason had sisterly love. And he was also young enough where he was adopted into the system. Annabeth grew up for 7 years without a loving family home. The only character of the Seven to have that. And so her justification for that is the tragedy of passive parenting. Let's see here. K-Star says, I thought it was funny how Nico took advantage of Percy's amnesia and acted like they'd never even met. Yeah, I don't blame him, to be honest with you. It's a fun scene. It's a very fun scene. Grace says, do you have a favorite quote from one of the Seven? I like one from Leo saying, I try not to think it interferes with being nuts. My favorite line that I've ever delivered in any of these is Frank destroying... Oh gosh, is it Enceladus? Whoever the Titan is at the end of Son of Neptune, where he kicks him over the border and destroys him. And when he goes, "Welcome to Canada, idiot," that's my favorite line I've ever delivered, because I really like turned my Vancouver accent up to 20 and said Canada instead of Canada. I don't know why. That's such a funny one-liner to me. So I'm going to have to choose that one just because I can't really think of any other. Paramaniac says... sorry, I skipped ahead real quick. Sarah W says, I understand there's reasons as to why she does certain things, but she doesn't evolve as much as I would have liked her to. I think she is a lot better in Chalice of the Gods, in my opinion. I might just still be blindly defending Annabeth because of my type, but Last Quig says, the best quote from the entire series is, like star signs, I'm a Leo. No, I'm a Leo, you're Percy. Yes, I remember that scene. That's pretty good. Paramaniac, Annabeth prides herself on being one of the smartest children of Athena, so when it comes to being wrong or saying sorry, I think it wounds her pride, which if you think back is her fatal flaw. You're right. Yeah, she has always felt the need to prove herself because someone needs to love her. Because no one ever has. Last Quig says, along with the damn bit from the original Percy. I was actually going to bring that one up, but when people talk about the 7, I don't know if they usually include the original Percy Jackson series in that. So yeah, my favorite set of quotes of all time is the damn snack bar joke from Titan's Curse. Any other questions that you guys have? We'll try to wrap things up in the next few minutes here, just because we've been on for almost 2.5 hours. This is the longest live stream we've ever had. I like the earlier time. It allows me a little more freedom with when to finish. While I wait for any final questions to trickle in, and like I said, I can stay as long as you guys want. It just my chat isn't actively uploading or updating as fast as it was. So if you guys have stuff, feel free to keep asking. But let's see here. I did want to one more time give a shout out to my, let's see if I click on the right one this time. National level patrons. These need to be updated, so if you don't see your name on this list, I promise I just haven't updated it in a week or so. But Andrew Gomez, Angela Rodriguez, Aiden, Braden Vera, Colt, Derek Rosario, Duncan Burley, Aaron Marie Thompson, Faye Coy, Anya Wuchek, Hardip Singh, James Kirchberger, Jeff McJefferson, Kate S., Lindsay Miller, Lobo Jenkins, Lucy, Lyra MB, Matt Zucker, Mika Tamando, Moses Ojibodi, Nathaniel Barlow, Nicole, Peyton Austin, R., Sadie Martinez, Skylar Seidenkranz, Srinija Srinivasan. I get better at that every time. I'm proud of myself. I'm not there yet. Taylor Grande, Tiffany Martinez, Trevor Lyman, Trusty Astorius, X-Ray, and Alexei Staryakov. Those are my national tier patrons. And then a very, very special thank you to my League 2 patrons. That is my $10 and over tier. Brandon Doty, Hessa Al-Habashi, Rock and Ryan 99, Victoria Libretto, Juno, Rania, Katie Rose, Bella Joy, M. Alfaro, and Goose. My League 1 tier, that's $15 and above. Sneevatics, Brooke Bursma, and then my champion tier. And if you guys were unaware, the champion tier are part of my book club. So if you guys are able to do $25 a month or more, I send you a free book at the beginning of every single month. So if you want to join the book club, $25 a month or more, become a champion tier member today. The current 7 are John Buck, Charles Jacobson, Donald Easter, Dalton Bailey, Lydia Bryant, Zhukov Crawford, and Joseph Morrill. Thank you guys so much. And if I didn't name you guys, if you guys are just a part of my $3 tier, again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I will continue to do this even if I'm not making anything from it, but you guys just give a little more of that justification for me locking myself in my basement for 2 hours every night. So, let's see here. Mitch Green says, what's better, the Harry Potter books or Percy Jackson? From the perspective that I judge media, I would say Harry Potter, but I enjoy Percy Jackson just the same. K-Star says, I want to see the look on Talia's face in the show when Grover puts on Jesse McCartney. I forgot about that bit. Wow. That dates that book, doesn't it? Wow. You guys are taking me back to elementary school. I forgot about that bit. Wow. Yeah, that is an old book. Pyromaniac says, my favorite line was, my mom told me not to accept curses from strangers. That's a good one, too. Grace says, or Talia and Percy, he's hot. He's the sun god. That's not what I meant. Keep going with the quotes. I'm enjoying this. I'm forgetting a lot of these, but you guys are refreshing me on some really good scenes. Stinker says, thoughts on the Percy Jackson movies? I think they're fine movies on their own. As adaptations of the source material, they are horrendous. The plots are completely different, the character motivations are not the same, and the world is just, it's not an accurate portrayal of the world that we know. Henry Davis says, have you listened to The Lightning Thief, the musical? If so, thoughts? I have not, so I can't really give you my honest thoughts on that. I'll try to check that out sometime if I'm able to. K-Star says, I miss staying up till 2 a.m. to watch the series episodes. Me too, to be honest with you. My wife and I don't often watch TV or movies together, but she had never read Percy Jackson, and so we watched the first season together. We'd put our son to bed and then watch it every night, and I do kind of miss that. Let's see here. Grace says, what do you think of Magnus Chase and Alex Farrow? Probably saying that last name wrong. Yeah, good question. I really haven't. It's been a long time since I read Magnus Chase, to be honest with you. So I'm going to chicken out of this answer simply because I haven't read Magnus Chase in a long time. When we get to Magnus Chase, I think I'll be more comfortable answering Magnus Chase questions. But I'll give you my completely 50-50 answer of it's fine. Mirage GSM says, those quotes are arguably the best thing about the Percy Jackson series. My favorite, Percy Jackson is a comedy series. I don't know who it was, and I don't know how long ago it was. It might have been end of Mark of Athena or early House of Hades. No, it was House of Hades, I know for a fact. Because someone was complaining about the fact that Annabeth and Percy, someone in my comment section was commenting about the fact that Annabeth and Percy don't take the situation seriously enough. Like, there's too much comedy in the House of Hades stuff. And, like, what series have you been reading? Because, like, Percy Jackson has always prioritized comedy. That's what sets Percy Jackson as a children's series, is it prioritizes the comedic moments. Literally, Hazel is summoning visions of, like, Satan. Meanwhile, there's a farting weasel on her shoulder. Like, that's Rick Riordan's style. Like, Rick Riordan always prioritizes comedy. So when someone said that in my comment section, they're like, there's too much comedy here. I was like, have you ever read Percy Jackson? Like, I get what they were going for. It's a very serious situation. But, like, that's the whole... Like, Percy Jackson has always done that. Pyromaniac says, I've always wanted to read books out loud like you do, but the longer I read, the more I start stuttering and missing or skipping words. Do you have advice or anything? Just practice, to be honest with you. Like, if you listen to my first few recordings of either Percy Jackson or Harry Potter, I didn't edit at all. And I did that on purpose. But obviously you see my mistakes. And, like, I get grilled in my comments, which is fine. Like, the more comments, the more engagement, which helps the channel out. But it definitely demoralizes you a little bit the more you see negative comments. But I would say practice, and be confident with yourself. Like, there are some nights where I'll sit down and I'll be able to rip out like 6 straight chapters and maybe I don't even have a single mistake. And then there are other nights where, I don't know, maybe I have like a mouth sore or something, and like my voice is shot and I am stuttering all the time and I'm having to restart, and it's really demoralizing. And the big thing is just keep going. Like don't get discouraged. If it's something that you feel you really want to do, keep going even through the troubles that you have with it. And then once you push through them, if it's still something that you feel like, hey, I don't enjoy this as much as I thought I did, it's fine to stop. I really enjoy doing what I do here. I know you guys enjoy the work that I put out for you. And so that, like, I will gladly look back at the last year and a half of me doing this. And even though, like, some of my recording quality was really, really bad at the beginning, like, it has gotten me to where I am today. So just keep practicing, keep working through it is the biggest thing I can say. It's like anything. Let's see here. Also, your voice is so soothing. I legit fell asleep to several of your book readings of Percy Jackson. Well, thank you. Yeah, one of my goals has always been to just be a relaxing source for people. And, like, the word safe space gets thrown out in a lot of different contexts, but, like, I want this channel to be a place where you guys, like, don't have to worry about seeing spoilers in the comments, or don't have to, like, I want you guys to enjoy these stories through me. I never want to be the focus of this channel. I want the work that I put into these stories, which I adore and you guys have asked for. I just want to be a conduit for you guys to receive these stories, because I truly believe in my heart that you guys should have access to them, even if, like, you're visually impaired and are unable to read, or if you have ADHD or dyslexia and are unable to sit down and listen to stuff like that. That's why I'm here. This isn't about me. Even me sitting in front of a camera and talking for 2.5 hours. I want you guys to engage with these stories through someone who knows them inside and out, and so that's what I'm here for. Elias Quigg, behold the God's chosen beverage, Diet Coke, or along with Bob says hello. Bob says hello is a hard quote. I don't cry very often when I read. I'm not a very like outwardly physically emotional person. I don't cry very often. I cried when I finished Harry Potter on this channel. I cried when I finished the original Percy Jackson series on this channel, and I almost started crying when I read the Bob says hello line. K-Star says, you hit the Lord of the Titans in the eye with a blue plastic hairbrush. That's a good one, too. Well, and so, like, people complaining about that situation being, or the House of Hades situation being too comedic. Like, Percy literally finally meets Kronos, and then he gets hit in the face with a hairbrush. Like, there's always been comedy to lighten the mood of the series. Pyromaniac says, if not for the humor, the series would be super dark. You cannot tell me that you expect teens not to use humor or cope with literal death. Yeah, I completely agree. Tonal comedy is something that I've been struggling with my own series too. So I completely understand and appreciate the way that Rick Riordan does it in his series and the way he commits to it. Grace says, Annabeth, Percy explaining things to you is like lecturing a gerbil. I've never read Demigods and Magicians. It's on my my list, and it'll be up on the channel after we get done with Serpent's Shadow. Elias Quigg says, does Leo show up later in the series post Blood of Olympus? Yes. I can't remember which book he appears back in, but later on in Trials of Apollo, Leo does return. Hardest question ever. Who is better, Buford or Festus? Good question. Festus is a really good boy, but Buford is kind of the Swiss Army man. He kind of gets stuff done. I personally prefer Buford, but Festus, he's been there through thick and thin. Grace says, question, what is your favorite thing the Percy Jackson show changed from the book? My favorite thing that they changed from the book. That is a really good question. First, let me precede this by saying it has been a long time since I have watched the show. It's almost been out for a year, and I don't know that there are some episodes that I've watched since they aired. My favorite thing that they changed from the book. I don't know if it's my favorite thing. I enjoyed the visualization of Tartarus, if that makes any sense. The like, not just Tartarus, sorry, the underworld itself. I think the look of the underworld made it a little less like Dante's Inferno, which I think is how it's kind of always been interpreted and always been written. But the interpretation of the underworld is kind of just this emptiness a lot of the time, I think was really, really cool. And so I, like, off the top of my head, of all of the things that I can think of that they changed from the book, I would say that. A lot of the stuff that I enjoyed about the series was how they returned to what the book said compared to what the films did, if that makes any sense. Elias Quigg says, I was starting my senior year of high school when I started listening to your reading of The Lightning Thief. I'm now fully graduated and just want to thank you for sticking with it for our sakes. Well, thank you very much. I love hearing people's just kind of personal anecdotes of their connection to my channel or my readings. It makes me feel like I have done good work with these. So thank you guys. Really, like, I always mention, I kind of overdo it when I say I don't like, or I don't do this for the money. And I don't even make enough money to justify that. But what I do this for is for comments like that, and for learning how people are connecting with these stories through the work that I do. Nico, yeah, that's a really that actually, so it's not really a spoiler, but the end of Blood of Olympus is when this quote comes from. Nico, with great power comes a great need to take a nap. Wake me up later. Yeah, I like that one. Grace says, all right, is that Last Olympian? I can't remember. It's one of the finales. Grace says, what do you think of the whole Percy not being Nico's type, but Walker looks just like Will? So the actor for Will look like Percy's the way to... I don't know. We'll see if they get that far. It's kind of the big answer. One thing that I've learned as a Game of Thrones fan is you have to separate canons. Show canon is not inherent to book canon. And so projecting two things that don't exactly match is not always good as a reader. So try to separate movie canon from show canon from book canon. They are different things based on one of them. Pyromaniac says, also, how did you die? We drowned you in a bathtub. All three of you? Big bathtub. Yes, I remember that one. That's a good one as well. It does look like the chat is slowing down, so I think I will wrap this one to a close. One last time, if you guys are confused where things are disappearing to off of the channel, if you can't find videos that were on the channel, two things to do. One, check the playlists. They still may be in the playlists, but they may no longer be on our channel. I have just taken them from another channel and put them in playlists. Or go over to our Patreon and Vimeo sites. Links to both of them are in the description of this video, are also in the bio of the channel. So if you ever can't find something and want to find it, go check the links in the channel bio. That's where they ended up. Always for free. If they are on the channel now, they will always be available to you for free. The other thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned merch earlier. If you guys want an I Ate the Kitchen Table shirt, check out the link in the description. And then also the podcast, which I started last week. We are currently going through Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. We will be doing that every other week when we don't do our weekly live streams, but then we will go through Harry Potter, after which we will touch on Percy Jackson and then probably Hunger Games as well. So stay tuned for that if you like. Eventually, I'm going to try to get that up as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Maybe try to monetize it. That might help the channel just a little bit as well. Daily chapter uploads, Dune and Blood of Olympus will be going through to the middle of middle of September. After Blood of Olympus is done, the day after that, you'll get Chalice of the Gods. The day after that, we'll start on the Kane Chronicles. Once Dune is done, we will start on the Silver Chair. If you want to jump ahead by 4 weeks to 6 weeks, go over to patreon.com, $3 a month or more. You get access to all of those things that I've just mentioned in their complete forms, as well as we are currently on Chapter 5 of the Hunger Games. We are over halfway through Throne of Fire, which is the second book in the Kane Chronicles, and then after Hunger Games, we will then move on to the Last Battle, the Narnia book, Catching Fire, Fablehaven, and Mockingjay. So I'll answer these last few questions and then we will call it a close. That'll be weird. Keep in mind, at this rate, it'll be 10 to 12 years from now by the time they're caught up with the book series. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the live stream. On the bright side, Percy said, both Jason and I outrank you, Octavian, so we can both tell you to shut up. Thank you so much for responding to all the questions in such great detail. I don't usually join live streams, but this was very fun. Grace says, wish I was ADHD or dyslexic. All I got was lactose intolerance, and I love ice cream. And K-Star says, great stream. We'll try to be here next Thursday, but school does start on Tuesday next week here. Yeah, we won't have a live stream next Thursday. It'll be 2 weeks from today. So if I'm looking at a calendar, I want to say that is September 12th. So be here for that. Or next week, Thursday, probably, we will do episode 2 of our podcast. So if you want to join us for that, that will not be an open Q&A. That'll be specific to Harry Potter. So thank you guys very much. If you have other comments or questions that I didn't get to, leave them not in the chat, but leave them in the comments below, and stay tuned for more stuff. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Otherwise, we will hope to see you very, very soon.